My infertile sister-in-law attacked me at my baby shower. Now she wants to meet my daughter after losing her own baby. I've been married to my hubby, Sam, 34M, for 7 years. We met at a mutual friend's wedding in 2016. I was a bridesmaid, and Sam was a groomsman. We were matched to go down the aisle together, and there was an instant connection between us. Following the wedding, we spent the entire reception chatting and laughing. By the end of the night, we had swapped numbers and planned our first date. Following that, our relationship swiftly progressed. We learned we had a lot in common, including a passion for hiking, a similar interest in true crime podcasts, and a desire to create a family eventually. After a year of dating, Sam proposed during a twilight trek on our favorite trail. 6 months later, we celebrated a gorgeous fall wedding with our closest friends and family. We knew we wanted children from the outset. We began trying for a baby shortly after our honeymoon. At first, it was exhilarating. We joked about whether the baby would inherit my curly hair or Sam's dimples. But as the months went without a positive pregnancy test, that elation faded into anxiety. We attempted everything to improve our chances. I began meticulously tracking my ovulation, and we both made lifestyle adjustments. Sam stopped smoking, a habit he had since college. I gave up my favorite morning coffee. We joined the gym together, determined to get in the best shape of our lives, but nothing changed. After 2 years of unsuccessful attempts, we decided to see a reproductive doctor. Dr. Anderson performed various tests on both of us. The weeks spent waiting for findings were some of the most stressful of our life. When the results were eventually in, they were frustratingly inconclusive. There was no obvious explanation why we couldn't conceive. Dr. Anderson recommended us to keep trying, stating that sometimes these things simply need time. During this time, Sam's younger sister, Rachel, 29F, married her college sweetheart, Jack, 31M. Their wedding was a spectacular occasion, and I remember feeling envious as Rachel tossed her bouquet and joked about how she and Jack would be the next to have a baby. Little did I know how important that moment would be in our lives. As our struggle to conceive progressed, we began to feel isolated from our friends and family. It appeared that everyone around us was having babies effortlessly. Our social media accounts were flooded with pregnancy announcements and baby images, and each one felt like a hit in the gut. We began declining invites to baby showers and first birthday parties, finding them too hard to attend. After 5 years of trying, it finally happened. I was a week late, but I was reluctant to take a test because I didn't want to be disappointed again. Sam finally bought a pregnancy test and pushed me to use it. When those 2 pink lines emerged, we both erupted into tears of happiness. We must have taken 5 additional exams just to be certain. Given our background, we chose to wait until 12 weeks to announce the pregnancy. The weeks spent concealing our secret were both thrilling and terrible. Every sensation or wave of discomfort pushed me into a frenzy, fearing something might go wrong. But when our 12-week scan revealed our tiny bean dancing around on the screen, we realized it was time to express our delight. We announced our pregnancy during a family meal. Sam's parents were having their annual summer barbecue, which seemed like an ideal chance. When we announced the news, the response was extraordinary. Sam's mother burst into delighted tears, his father hugged him tightly, and my parents could not stop smiling. It was a magnificent moment that I will remember forever. Despite the excitement and congrats, I couldn't help but observe Rachel's reaction. While everyone else was rejoicing, she remained sat, her expression unreadable. When she eventually came over to congratulate us, her hug was stiff and her grin couldn't reach her eyes. I dismissed it at the time, figuring she was simply stunned by the news. As my pregnancy progressed, we began to prepare for our baby's birth. We transformed our home office into a nursery by painting the walls in a gentle mint green. Sam's father assisted us in assembling the crib, which turned out to be a full-day event complete with pizza and non-alcoholic beverages for me. My mother and I spent weekends shopping at thrift stores seeking one-of-a-kind, vintage-inspired baby outfits. Rachel's behavior remained unusual during this period. She rarely inquired about the pregnancy, and when she did, she frequently used a negative tone. When I was showing Rachel a beautiful hand-knitted blanket created by my grandmother, she said that it was a shame to put so much effort into something that would most likely be spit up on. Despite Rachel's attitude, we tried to involve her in the prenatal process. We invited her and Jack to our gender reveal celebration, where we learned we were expecting a girl. Rachel arrived late, barely chatted with anyone, and left early, stating she had a headache. As my due date approached, Sam's mother volunteered to throw us a baby shower. We were delighted by her offer and gladly accepted. The day of the shower arrived, and our house was packed with friends and family eager to celebrate our soon-to-arrive baby girl. Rachel arrived an hour late, clearly upset. Without saying anything, She pushed a gift into my hands and walked directly to the food table. Throughout the celebration, she made snarky remarks about the decorations, games, and even the gifts that others brought. I overheard her tell Jack that the entire affair was tacky and over the top. When it came time to receive gifts, everything went downhill quickly. Rachel's face darkened as I unwrapped each item and thanked the donor. When I unwrapped her gift, a simple white onesie, she stood up and exclaimed, "This is so unfair." The room fell hushed as Rachel continued her diatribe. She ranted about how she had been trying to conceive for years, how she deserved to be a mother more than I did, and how unfair life was. Then, to everyone's surprise, she grabbed the cake knife off the table and lunged at me. Fortunately, Sam's quick reflexes saved the day. He managed to grab Rachel's arm before she could get to me. During the ensuing turmoil, someone contacted the police. Rachel was arrested for attempted assault, and the baby shower ended abruptly. I was shaken to my core. The notion that my sister-in-law had attempted to hurt me and possibly my unborn kid was beyond comprehension. Sam was heartbroken, split between concern for me and disbelief over his sister's behavior. Following the incident, Jack begged us not to press charges. He explained that Rachel had been dealing with infertility and despair, and that she was not in her right mind. But Sam and I couldn't let it go. We chose to press charges because we felt Rachel ought to face the consequences of her actions. Rachel is currently in jail awaiting trial, and our family is torn apart. Some family members believe we are being overly harsh and should dismiss the charges for the sake of family harmony. Others agree with our conclusion, claiming Rachel's acts were reprehensible regardless of her mental state. I can't help feeling guilty. Did I push Rachel too hard by celebrating my pregnancy when I knew she was struggling? Should I have been more sympathetic to her emotions? But then I remember how she endangered not just me, but also my unborn kid, and I feel right in our decision to have my sister-in-law arrested during my baby shower. Update 1. It's been a month since the baby shower incident, and much has changed. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their help and advice. Our family has been going through a difficult time, and your words have provided some comfort. Rachel's trial was scheduled for next month, but there have been some unexpected changes. About 2 weeks ago, Jack asked Sam if we might meet to discuss the situation. After some deliberation, we decided to meet in a neutral location, a small coffee shop that Sam and I used to go to when we first started dating. When we arrived, not only did we find Jack, but also Rachel's parents. Rachel's mother, Linda, 58F, immediately began pleading with us to dismiss the accusations. She stated that Rachel had been diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, and that she was now taking medication and receiving therapy. Linda maintained that Rachel didn't belong in jail and that she needed help rather than punishment. As Linda spoke, I couldn't help but recall the early days of Sam and Rachel's relationship, when Sam first introduced me to the family. Rachel had been friendly and hospitable. We even developed a friendship, going shopping together or having girls' nights with wine and rom-coms. It was difficult to accept that Rachel was the one who had come at me with a knife. Jack then revealed the bombshell: Rachel was pregnant. Apparently, they had been going through IVF, and their most recent try had been successful. Jack stated Rachel found out just days before our baby shower but was too overwhelmed to comprehend it properly. He hypothesized that her outburst was caused by a combination of hormones and mental health difficulties. I was stunned. Part of me sympathized with Rachel, understanding how overwhelming her feelings must have been, but another part of me couldn't get over the dread I felt when she approached me with that knife. I remembered the chilly look in her eyes, so unlike Rachel I thought I knew. Sam and I separated ourselves to talk about the problem quietly. We walked to a neighboring park, where we used to go for picnics in the beginning of our relationship. As we sat on a bench, the enormity of the decision before us felt overpowering. We were split. On the one hand, we knew Rachel was going through a difficult period and needed assistance. We reflected on our years of friendship with her, the holidays we had spent together, and the private jokes we shared. On the other hand, her actions had endangered me and our pregnant kid, and we believed she should face the consequences. Following a lengthy conversation, we agreed to speak with our lawyer about the potential of a plea bargain. We didn't want to drop the charges totally, but we were willing to work out a solution that would guarantee Rachel got the care she needed while simultaneously holding her accountable for her conduct. When we returned to the coffee shop and conveyed our opinions, Jack and Rachel's parents were relieved. They thanked us sincerely for our willingness to offer an alternative to jail time. Linda hugged me with tears in her eyes, and I was reminded of happier times with this family. As we exited the coffee shop, I had a range of feelings. I was still outraged about what had happened, but I also had a glimmer of faith that our family could recover from it. Sam gripped my hand as we headed to our car, and I knew whatever occurred, we'd deal with it together. The next day, We met with our lawyer to talk about our alternatives. She suggested that a plea deal could be a good solution, potentially leading to Rachel receiving mandated therapy, community service, and probation instead of jail time. We decided to proceed with this technique. However, things took an unexpected turn when we received a call from Jack later that week. Rachel was hospitalized owing to pregnancy difficulties. The stress of the impending trial, along with her mental health difficulties, had taken its toll on her physical health. Jack sounded fatigued and worried over the phone. He informed us that Rachel had begun bleeding and was at risk of losing the baby. As he talked, I felt a rush of contradictory feelings. Despite everything that had transpired, I would never wish the agony of losing a pregnancy on anyone, especially Rachel, given how long she had been trying to conceive. We're now in a difficult position. The trial has been postponed due to Rachel's condition, and we're questioning if we're doing the right thing. Are we being overly tough or not harsh enough? It's a fine balance between justice, compassion, and family devotion, and I'm not convinced we're getting it right. In light of this, Sam and I have spent a lot of time discussing our own approaching parenthood. We've started taking parenting classes, and each one reminds us of the immense responsibility we're about to take on. It has made us even more determined to provide a safe and stable environment for our daughter. I will keep you updated as things go. Thank you all for your continued support during this difficult time. Update 2. It's been 3 months since my previous update, and Rachel's position has taken some unforeseen turns. I apologize for the lack of updates. Things have been stressful, to say the least. First, I should say that I gave birth to our lovely daughter, Lily, 6 weeks ago. Despite the stress of Rachel's ongoing condition, the birth was a success and Lily and I are both fine. Sam has been an incredible father, and we are gradually adjusting to life with the newborn. The night Lily was born was a tornado of emotion. My labor began abruptly 2 weeks early, and everything happened very rapidly. Sam was fantastic throughout the procedure, holding my hand and encouraging me every step of the way. When we finally heard Lily's first cry, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. Holding her for the first time, I experienced a love I had never imagined imaginable. We were in a state of new parent euphoria for the first several days in the hospital, but reality hit us hard when we learned about Rachel. As I said in my previous report, Rachel was hospitalized owing to pregnancy difficulties. Unfortunately, despite her medical team's best efforts, Rachel lost the baby at 16 weeks. It was a heartbreaking blow for her and Jack, sending shockwaves throughout the family. I recall when Sam broke the news to me. We were in our hospital room, with Lily resting soundly in her bassinet. Sam's face paled as he recounted the information he had just received from his parents. My heart fell. Despite everything that had occurred between us, I would never wish such suffering on anyone. Rachel's mental health deteriorated significantly following this catastrophe. She was admitted to a mental health hospital for intensive therapy. Given the circumstances, our counsel told us that pursuing the charges at this time was unlikely to be in anyone's best interests. After much deliberation and soul-searching, Sam and I agreed to drop the charges. It was not an easy decision, and part of me is still conflicted about it. However, witnessing Rachel in such a vulnerable situation made us understand that what she requires right now is assistance and support, not legal punishment. We made it plain to Jack and Rachel's parents that our choice was subject to certain conditions. Rachel must continue her therapy and treatment, and she is not permitted to have any unsupervised contact with us or Lily until her therapist deems it acceptable. They gladly accepted these stipulations. The family has had a mixed reaction to our decision. Sam's parents are relieved and thankful, hoping that this is the first step toward reconciling our shattered family. When we told Linda about our decision, she gave us a grateful expression. She hugged both of us, tears running down her cheeks. My parents, on the other hand, are concerned that we are being overly indulgent, leaving ourselves open to potential problems with Rachel. My father, in particular, was upset. He reminded me of the fear and tension I had felt during my pregnancy as a result of Rachel's conduct. It took a long conversation to help him grasp our point of view. Sam and I are attempting to focus on our new life with Lily. We have strengthened our home security by installing cameras and a new alarm system. It may appear paranoid, but given what transpired, we believe it is vital for our peace of mind. Jack has kept us posted on Rachel's progress. She is still at the psychiatric facility, but she is allegedly making slow but steady improvements. He claimed that she has expressed tremendous regret for her conduct during the baby shower, but we have not heard from her personally. I'm still processing my emotions about everything that has transpired. While I'm delighted we made a decision that could perhaps assist Rachel and heal our family, I can't get over my anxiety and distress. I'm not sure if I'll ever be able to completely forgive Rachel or feel safe around her again. For the time being, We're taking things day by day and focusing on Lily and our small family. The future of our relationship with Rachel is uncertain, but we believe that with time and continuing therapy, some type of reconciliation is possible. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'd like to provide some last views on the situation. A lot has changed, and I believe this may be my final post regarding this phase of our lives. Lily is 7 months old and the light of our lives. She's starting to crawl and babble, and each day is a new adventure. Sam and I are fatigued, but happier than we have ever been. Every day, watching Sam with Lily reminds me of why I fell in love with him. He's very patient and compassionate, always ready with a goofy expression to make her laugh or a soothing voice when she's upset. Rachel was freed from the psychiatric facility approximately 3 months ago. Her physicians say she's made considerable progress in overcoming her despair, anxiety, and grief over her lost pregnancy. She is still undergoing outpatient therapy and following a consistent medication schedule. Rachel contacted us through Jack about a month after her release and asked to meet Lily. Sam and I were initially hesitant, but after discussing it with our therapist, yes, we began seeing one to help us process everything that had happened. We agreed to a brief supervised visit. The meeting was unpleasant, to say the least. It occurred in our living room, with Jack and Sam's parents present. Rachel was visibly apprehensive and struggled to communicate with us. She brought Lily a handmade blanket and apologized sincerely for her actions at the baby shower. She indicated that she had been in a very bad place psychologically and emotionally, and she deeply regretted her actions. Rachel held Lily for the first time, and I felt an odd combination of feelings. On the one hand, seeing her lovingly engage with my kid reminded me of our previous close friendship. On the other hand, I couldn't get over the vision of her lunging at me with a knife. I found myself tensing up whenever Rachel moved, even though I knew she wouldn't hurt Lily. While I appreciated her apologies, I found it difficult to fully accept. The memory of her coming at me with a knife is something I'll never forget. Sam seemed more open to forgiveness, but I could sense he was still guarded. He maintained a close eye on Rachel during the visit, never leaving her seat with Lily. Since then, we have had a couple more monitored visits. Each one gets a bit better, but I still have a long way to go before I'm comfortable leaving Lily alone with Rachel. We've settled into a monthly visitation schedule, always with Jack present and generally at Sam's parents' place. It's neutral territory, so everyone feels more at ease. Jack has been tremendously helpful throughout the entire process. He is always present during the visits and will quickly remove Rachel if she displays any signs of anxiety. He's also been going to therapy with Rachel to work on their relationship and process their shared grief over their baby's loss. The rest of the family is gradually readjusting to their new normal. Sam's parents are happy to have the family together again, but they respect our boundaries with Rachel. Linda's eyes light up with relief every time we all make it into the same room without incident. Sam's father has taken to playing peacekeeper, always ready with a joke or a change of subject when emotions mount. My parents remain suspicious, but are making an attempt for Lily's sake. They've started joining us at some of the family occasions, but I can tell they're constantly on high alert around Rachel. My mother, in particular, keeps a close eye on Rachel when she is near Lily. I love their protectiveness, even if it can add to the anxiety. Looking back on everything that has happened, I have conflicting emotions. While I'm relieved Rachel is receiving the assistance she requires, I can't help but worry what could have happened if we had detected her difficulties sooner. Could all of this have been avoided if we had been more alert? Some nights, I lie awake revisiting every encounter we had in the months preceding up to the baby shower, looking for clues we could have overlooked. At the same time, I've learned a lot about establishing boundaries and putting my family's safety and well-being first. I've also developed a better grasp of the intricacies of mental health disorders and how they affect entire families. It has increased my empathy, not only for Rachel, but also for others who may be battling silently. For now, we are cautiously optimistic about the future. We are taking things slowly with Rachel, always keeping Lily's best interests in mind. I'm not sure if our connection with Rachel will ever be the same, but we're eager to see where this new chapter leads us. Last week, we hosted a family supper at Sam's parents' home. It wasn't perfect, there were still awkward moments and tension, but it was the closest we'd gotten to normal in over a year. Watching Rachel assist Sam's mother in the kitchen or witnessing her giggle at one of Jack's jokes, I got flashes of the sister-in-law I once knew. It gives me hope that, with time and effort from all sides, we may create a new type of family dynamic. As for Sam and myself, the entire experience has brought us closer together. We've learned to rely on one another in new ways and to be more open about our worries and hopes. Every night, as we put Lily into bed, I am reminded how fortunate we are and how much we have to be thankful for. Thank you for following our story and for your support at this difficult time. Your guidance and encouragement have been helpful. While I hope to never have to post about such a tough issue again, I am glad for the support I have gotten here. If there's one thing I've taken away from this, it's that healing is possible, even in the most unexpected circumstances. Now to the next story, story 2. 15 years as a stepmom, never felt like family. Until my stepkids had children, and what happened next transformed our relationship completely. I'm Stacy, 42F, and I never anticipated I'd be in this situation. My husband Harry, 46, and I have been married for 15 years, but our journey began much earlier. We met in a local coffee shop, where I was working part-time while finishing off my social work degree. Harry was a regular client who usually ordered the same thing, a big black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He'd walked in with his twins, Lucas and Lydia, now 25, who were just 7 at the time. I recall when I first saw them. Harry appeared fatigued as he tried to manage 2 rambunctious children while balancing his briefcase and coffee. I offered to help them transport their snacks to a table. That tiny act of compassion started a conversation, and we became friends over the course of a few months. Harry revealed to me that he was a widower. His wife Anna died when the twins were just 3 years old. She was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer shortly after giving birth and died after receiving significant treatment. Harry was left to raise 2 toddlers alone while also working as a high school history teacher. As our friendship expanded, so did my feelings for the twins. They were adorable children, but I could see the pain and confusion in their eyes. Lucas was shy and reserved, constantly sticking to his father's side, whilst Lydia was more gregarious but prone to dramatic outbursts. I began to look forward to their visits, even on my days off. It took Harry about a year to ask me out on a proper date. We were both scared about dating again after losing his wife, and I was concerned about potentially disturbing the lives of 2 children who had already been through a lot. However, we decided to give it a try. Our bond developed slowly. We were careful not to rush anything, especially with the twins. I didn't see them as Dad's girlfriend until we'd been together for 6 months. Even then, we kept things casual by going to the park or watching movies at home. The first major challenge occurred when Harry asked me to move in with them after we'd been dating for 2 years. The twins were 9 years old at the time, and their opinions were varied. Lucas withdrew even farther, not speaking with me for weeks. Lydia, on the other hand, was thrilled at first but then began acting out, screaming tantrums and refusing to follow the rules. It was a hard moment. I was trying to find my position in this ready-made family while still honoring Anna's memory. Harry and I had numerous late-night conversations about how to address the matter. We even contemplated marital therapy to help us navigate this unfamiliar territory. Things gradually improved. I made an intentional effort to spend one-on-one time with each twin. I realized Lucas had a passion for making model airplanes, and we began working on projects together. I signed Lydia up for a pottery class, which became our Saturday morning tradition. When Harry proposed a year later, we sat down with the twins to discuss it before I responded. We wanted them to feel included in the decision-making process. It was not a simple chat. Lydia wondered if this indicated I was attempting to replace their mother. Lucas wondered if they'd have to call me Mom now. We informed them that I was not trying to replace Anna and that they could call me whatever they wanted. Finally, they granted their blessing, and we were married in a simple ceremony in our backyard. Our only attendants were the twins, Lucas as best man and Lydia as maid of honor. It wasn't ideal, but it was appropriate for our family. The years that followed were filled with both delight and challenges. We had our fair share of family trips, movie nights and holiday celebrations, but we also coped with the twins' adolescent rebellions, academic challenges and the constant grieving process as they got older and learned more about the mother they had lost. I did my best to be present for them without overstepping. I helped with their homework, went to their school events, and even learned how to make Anna's renowned chocolate chip cookies from an old recipe card. There were times when I felt like a member of the family, such as when Lydia asked me to help her shop for her first bra or Lucas confided in me about his first crush. But there were moments when I felt like an outsider. Every year on Anna's birthday, the 3 of them went to her grave, while I stayed at home. Family gatherings with Harry's parents frequently included reminiscing about Anna, and I felt embarrassed not knowing how to contribute. Despite these hurdles, we were able to build a nice friendship throughout the years. It wasn't ideal, but we made it work. I'd always hoped they'd regard me as more than just their father's wife, perhaps even as a parental figure, but I knew that might not happen. Fast forward to the present day, Lydia welcomed her first kid, a lovely baby girl, last month. She and her husband Jake, 26M, named her Annabelle. Lydia shared a touching post on social media about how they chose the name to honor her late mother, Anna, and Jake's grandmother, B. I was truly thrilled for them. I recall holding Lydia's hand through her wedding day nerves, and now she is a mother herself. But reading the comments made me feel a twinge of hurt. Friends and family commented on how lovely it was that they honored both grandmothers. It dawned on me then that, in their views, I was not regarded as a grandma at all. I did not want to cause a fuss. I didn't want to take away Lydia and Jake's special time. So I liked the post, made a congratulatory comment and tried to put my emotions aside. A week later, we had a family meal to commemorate the new arrival. Lucas was there with his wife, Emma, 24F, who is expecting their first kid in a couple of months. During dinner, Lucas casually remarked that they were thinking of naming their baby after Harry if it was a male or Emma's mom if it was a girl. I felt the usual agony again, but smiled and nodded in unison with everyone else. After dinner, while Harry and the kids were gushing over newborn Annabelle in the living room, I went out onto the porch for some fresh air. My sister, Jenny, 39F, was visiting and followed me out. Jenny and I have always been close, and she has been my confidant throughout this process of becoming a stepmother. She sensed something was wrong, and after some probing, I confided in her. I told her how I felt left out, how even after 15 years, I felt like an outsider in my own family. I said that while I realized it was ridiculous to be offended over baby names, it further reinforced the reality that the twins would never genuinely see me as family. What I didn't realize was that Harry had come looking for me and overheard some of our talk. He waited until Jenny walked inside before confronting me. He was furious that I hadn't told him about my feelings, arguing that as my husband and the twins' father, he should have been the first to know. I attempted to explain that I didn't want to burden him or cause problems for him and the kids. I realized there was nothing I could do because sentiments and relationships cannot be forced, but Harry insisted on talking to the twins about including me more. I begged him not to, knowing it would only make things awkward and perhaps harm the bond we already have. Harry accused me of concealing secrets and claimed he had the right to know what was going on in his family. We ended up having a heated disagreement, with him accusing me of being selfish for not confiding in him, and me believing he was entirely missing the issue. Things have been tight at home. Harry is still furious that I spoke with Jenny instead of him, and I'm frustrated that he doesn't understand why I kept it to myself. I'm dreading having the twins over for a family cookout this weekend. I'm not sure how to act around them now, knowing Harry might say something. Is it wrong for me not to tell my husband about my feelings? Should I have confided in him despite knowing he'd try to fix things? I am at a loss on what to do next. Update 1. It's been nearly a month since my previous post, and a lot has happened. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their advice and support, which truly helped me gain perspective on the issue. The family cookout, which I was dreading, turned out to be a watershed moment. Despite my pleas, Harry decided to speak with the twins about including me more. As I had expected, things did not start off well. The day began innocently enough. Harry was at the grill. I was putting together the picnic table, and the twins came with their spouses and baby Annabelle. There was the normal gushing over the baby and catching up on recent happenings, but I could sense Harry was nervous, and I readied myself for what I knew would happen. After we'd finished eating, Harry cleared his throat and announced that we needed to have a family conversation. Lucas and Lydia exchanged perplexed looks. Harry began by expressing his pride in the family we had formed together over the last 15 years. Then he delivered the bombshell. He informed the twins that I felt left out and hurt, particularly because I was not considered Annabelle's grandmother. The twins were noticeably shocked. Lydia, still battling with postpartum hormones, burst into sobs. She claimed she never intended to hurt me and had never considered it that way. Lucas, the more restrained one, simply looked uncomfortable and muttered something about wanting to check on Emma. I felt humiliated. This was precisely why I hadn't wanted to say anything. I attempted to calm things down by stating it wasn't a huge issue and that I was just being too sensitive, but Harry, bless his heart, wouldn't let it go. He insisted that we all sit down and discuss it. The conversation that followed was passionate and emotional, lasting several hours. We discussed the past 15 years, both the good and the bad. The twins talked about their devotion to their mother's memories and their early resentment of me. Lucas said that when I first came in, he was concerned I was attempting to replace his mother. He admitted that he used to hide the few images they had of Anna, afraid I would get rid of them. It crushed my heart to hear this, because I had always tried to cherish Anna's memory. Lydia admitted that she sometimes felt bad about admiring me, as if it were a violation of her mother's memories. She told of a time when she was 13 and had her first period while Harry was abroad at a conference. She expressed her gratitude that I was there to assist her, but she also felt bad that her mother was not present to enjoy that moment with her. I confessed my personal insecurities and my ongoing struggle to find my position within the family. I told them about the times I'd stayed up late to help with school projects, the soccer games and dancing recitals I'd attended, and how pleased I was of each accomplishment. But I also admitted to feeling hurt when I was presented as Dad's wife, rather than as a parental figure. To my amazement, Lucas and Lydia had no idea how I felt. They revealed that they had always seen me as a positive influence in their life, but they had no idea how much I had spent emotionally. We all cried a lot that day. It was difficult, but also cathartic. By the end, we had come to a new understanding. The twins realized that while I could never replace their mother, I had been a consistent and loving presence in their lives. They apologized for not acknowledging my role more clearly. I apologized for not articulating my feelings more effectively throughout the years. We all decided that in the future, we would make a greater effort to communicate our gratitude to one another. The BBQ concluded on a considerably lighter note than it began. Lydia grabbed me hard as they left, whispering, "We love you, Stacy. You are family, and always have been." Since then things have changed. There is a new openness in our connections. Lucas and Emma have started asking for my advice on baby names, and Lydia has been sending me photos of Annabelle on a regular basis, frequently with notes like, "Grandma Stacy's little angel." Lydia called me last week in a panic because Annabelle was running a high temperature. She said, "Mom, I don't know what to do." It was the first time she'd ever called me Mom, and while she was probably too stressed to notice, it meant the world to me. After everyone had left, Harry and I had a private conversation. I explained why I had been hesitant to express my sentiments to him, and he apologized for reacting so passionately. We've both made a commitment to improve our communication moving forward. It isn't perfect, and we're all still figuring things out, but for the first time in 15 years, I actually feel like a member of the family. Sometimes it takes a difficult encounter to clear the air and go on. Update 2. It has been 6 months since my last report, and I would like to highlight some big changes in our family dynamics. 2 months ago, Lucas and Emma welcomed their baby child. They named him Christopher Thomas, after Emma's father and Harry. But here's what surprised me. They wanted me to be the godmother. When they explained their decision, Lucas stated, "Stacy, you've always been a source of strength and love in our life. We want our youngsters to have the same unshakable presence." I was moved beyond words. It felt like a genuine appreciation of my role in their lives. The baptism ceremony was magnificent, and when holding little Christopher, I felt an unexpected wave of love. The twins' christening brought up memories of their childhood. I recall one day when Lucas was about 10 years old and had a large school presentation. He was so frightened that morning that he became ill. Harry had a crucial meeting that he couldn't miss, so I stayed at home with Lucas. We spent the morning rehearsing his speech, and I taught him some deep breathing methods to help calm his anxieties. When he arrived home that afternoon, beaming with pleasure from his great presentation, he hugged me tightly and said, "Thank you, Stacy. You are the best." That was one of the first times I really felt like a parent to him. Lydia has also been making attempts. She's been phoning me nearly every day, asking for guidance on anything from diaper rash to sleep routines. Last week, she invited me to a grandma-granddaughter day out with Annabelle. We went shopping, ate lunch, and she introduced me to her pals as my other mom, Stacy. I'll be honest, that made me cry a little. Lydia shared a wedding-related reminiscence with us on our day out. She informed me that shortly before walking down the aisle, she experienced a moment of terror and wished her mother was present. But then she looked over and saw me, and a sense of serenity came over her. She went on, "I realized then that while I'll always miss my mom, I'm so grateful to have you too." Harry has been absolutely supportive throughout this. He's made a concerted effort to engage me in family choices and discussions about the grandchildren. He frequently reminds the twins to keep me informed about things, which I appreciate. However, not everything has gone smoothly. We encountered a minor snag last month when Harry's parents came to visit. They made some casual remarks about how fortunate the twins were to have their real grandparents around. I saw Harry tense up, about to say something, but Lucas and Lydia jumped in to correct him. They insisted that I was just as much a grandparent to their children. It made me proud to watch them stand up for our relationship. Harry's parents were taken aback but appeared to accept it. Later, Harry apologized for his parents' actions, but I told him that it was unnecessary. The fact that the twins had protected me meant more than an apology. We're arranging a huge family vacation next month, including the grandchildren. It's the first time we've done something like this, so I'm both excited and nervous. But ultimately, I'm thankful for how far we've come. This trip has taught me that family is more than blood and titles. It is about love, understanding, and the willingness to go through challenging emotions together. I'm looking forward to many more years of being Grandma Stacy to these amazing grandchildren. Update 3. It's been a year since my first post, and I'd want to provide a last update on our family's journey. The family vacation I mentioned in my last update was a watershed moment for us. We leased a beach home for 2 weeks, and it was the first time we'd been together for an extended amount of time since the twins left for college. Spending time together strengthened our ties. Of course, there were tense moments. Living in close quarters with in-laws and tiny children isn't easy. We had a few disagreements about who was responsible for babysitting and who was in charge of cooking dinner. But there were also numerous instances of delight and laughing. One day, we went to the beach together. Watching Harry and Christopher construct sandcastles while Lydia and I took turns dipping Annabelle's toes in the surf gave me a sense of contentment I hadn't felt before. That evening, as we gathered around a bonfire roasting marshmallows and telling stories, Lydia stepped up and announced that she and Jake are expecting their second child in around 7 months. Then she smiled at me and said, "Stacy, if it's a girl, we'd like to name her after you, Stacy Anna, to honor both the amazing women who have been mothers to me." I was speechless. Harry squeezed my hand and I could tell he was also in tears. Lucas added that if they have a girl next, they would like to do the same. It was an experience I will never forget. The remainder of the holiday was spent talking excitedly about the new baby and remembering the twins' childhood. One evening, Lucas took out an old photo album he had brought with him. As we glanced through it, we noticed a photo from their high school graduation. In it I stood between Lucas and Lydia, all of us smiling at the camera. Lucas pointed to it and remarked, "You know, Stacy, I remember this day vividly. I was quite apprehensive about my speech, and you spent the entire morning helping me practice. I could not have done it without you." Since returning from vacation, our relationships have only gotten stronger. The twins frequently joke about their children having 3 sets of grandparents: Harry's parents, their in-laws, and ourselves. They ensure that we are all equally involved in our grandchildren's lives. Last month, when Christopher took his first steps, Lucas made sure to FaceTime us so we could see it live. Lydia contacted me in tears last week because Annabelle had said her first word, Nana, as she calls me. Throughout all of this, Harry and I have become closer. He has told me several times that he is proud of how I have handled everything and that he is grateful for the love I have offered his children throughout the years. He surprised me the other day by pulling up our old wedding video. We spent the evening viewing it, laughing at how young we all looked and reflecting on how far we'd come. Last week was our 16th wedding anniversary. The twins surprised us with a family photo shoot featuring all 4 grandparents, themselves, their spouses, and the grandchildren. When we received the images, one stuck out. It was a picture of myself with Lucas, Lydia, and the grandchildren, all of us laughing at something off camera. Looking at it, you'd never guess I wasn't their biological mother. Lydia had it framed and gave it to me with the following note: "To the woman who chose to love us, thank you for being our bonus mom. We love you." As I sit here writing this, with the photo on my desk, I am overwhelmed with thankfulness. This path has not been simple, but it has been extremely rewarding. To anyone dealing in a mixed family scenario, I encourage them to keep loving, trying and talking. It may take some time, but it is worth it. Our family is not perfect, but it is our own. We still have disputes and misunderstandings, but we approach them with open hearts and honest communication. The road ahead isn't always apparent, but I'm interested to see where it takes us. As for me, I'm excited to meet baby Stacy Anna in a few months and continue to make memories with this beautiful family that I'm so privileged to be a part of. Now to the next story, Story 3. Ex-wife who cheated and abandoned her family shows up years later, with another man's child, begging for a second chance. What should I do? Some background here: I, 37 male, and Angela, 36, my ex-wife, had met in our mid-20s. We met when I was about 24 and we were employed by the same company. We were married after 2 years of dating, and 3 years into our marriage we had 2 kids, now 9 and 7 years old. Though I had told her it would be good with me if she did, I didn't want to put her through anything she didn't want, hence the second pregnancy was unexpected and she wasn't happy about it. She didn't kill it either. Things were still wonderful between us and we were as in love as we could have following our first daughter. After the second pregnancy though, that changed. She started to get rather irritated, sullen, and started to pick on our eldest or me consistently. Just realizing this was due to all the hormones, I tried to reconcile with this new Angela. After some time, we believed this would change. Instead, things just became worse. Around her, my daughter and I learnt to walk on eggshells. She was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, but I was running everything. After our first child, She had quit her job of her own volition and done all the housework along with looking after our eldest while I worked till she fell pregnant for the second time. She claimed she was too weary to take care of our children and the house, hence we had to get a maid while she was pregnant. I consented, even though it was only somewhat outside our means since at the time I wasn't making enough. Especially considering Angela's pregnancy, I wanted not to trouble her too much. After our second daughter was born, I thought she would come back tending to the house and children throughout the day. Let me also state clearly that I was not among those men who neglected household chores. Though I was tired from working, I did anything I could to help out after returning from my job. I assumed she would take some time to heal after she delivered our younger daughter, but then we would go back to our regular life. Still, several months passed and she showed no change. She refused to help out around the house and stayed exactly as angry and agitated. She would simply spend all day seated at home watching TV. She hardly engaged in any activities with the children either. She would periodically pay our neighbor to drive them to the park. Though I wouldn't want to come across as hostile, I did feel that way as I was working day and night while she wouldn't even do the minimum at home. Additionally, proving somewhat costly for me to pay for a maid to do all the cooking, cleaning and other domestic tasks was, along with all the other bills, I had to look after and wanted to preserve money for our daughter's futures. Angela refused to assist me in any kind, hence that was practically impossible. After around 6 months following the birth of our younger daughter, I realized we could not continue like this and had to speak with Angela. Knowing this would be a challenging conversation, so I requested my parents to watch our girls for the day. They agreed. That day, I sat Angela down and told her I realized she was fatigued with 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to assist me and coordinate with me. I told her that we were finding a maid to be too costly, and I needed her to respect her word and return to at least some of the housework so we may renegotiate and cut the housekeeper's pay to save some money. She claimed she was too busy watching the children to handle any of the housework, so she turned down the proposal right away. She also advised me to start making more instead of justifying our financial condition by pointing out her guilt. Although I attempted to persuade her I was already doing my best, if we were to make this marriage work she needed to help too. I also mentioned how, from what I knew, she simply let the children watch television with her for hours while she watched tacky reality TV, neglecting their needs. The housekeeping had remarked to me casually this as well. She flared up and accused me of spying on her through the maid, so I quickly understood that bringing this up was a big mistake. Saying she was done being pushed about by me and forced to do all the labor while I purportedly did nothing except sit at a desk for a few hours each day, she went on a rant against me. Claiming I should be the man of the house, she then chastised me for asking her to help and blamed me for not being able to pay a maid. While I was the rational one expecting her to help the house, her charges were utterly nonsensical and she was merely grabbing at straws to give the impression that her not doing anything all day was normal. We finally got into a huge argument and she labeled me a loser unable to afford to be with a woman like her. Given how terrified our eldest daughter was of her, I responded by accusing her of being a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother. Now she was failing as a wife too. That comment definitely spoke to her, and she pushed me hard. I stumbled, fell back on the coffee table, broke the glass and hurt myself. I had to get hurried to the ER. She continued to apologize and weep all through, but fortunately my back was only mildly injured. She had to move out. I told her I no longer trusted her. Around the children, I couldn't trust her either as I had no idea when she could lose her fury once more and damage them as well. While Angela was still living, I urged our parents to look after our daughters. She kept protesting for a week, pledging she would never let something like that happen once more, but I couldn't believe her. She begged me to give her another chance. I almost filed for divorce. By the conclusion of the week, we decided she would receive therapy and go live with her parents for some period. I would let her move back in with us only once she had been vetted by a medical professional. She was willing to work on it and improve, thus clearly something was quite wrong with her since happy individuals do not act that way. I also wanted my girls to have their mother, hence I chose not to divorce her just yet and give our marriage another go. While we were living apart, we also began marriage counseling. But, ultimately it proved to be ineffective. She turned out to be cheating on me. Angela was living with her folks when my parents came in to help with my girls. We attended weekly marriage counseling sessions and for some time things looked to be improving. Her therapist contacted me as well. She informed me she had postpartum depression but was improving. Anger problems had been one of her symptoms. She had never had them before, but they became very out of hand when she pushed me. For both of us, that woke us awake. This continued for about a year and around 6 months in there I even let her visit our girls under my direction. It delighted me to watch her gradually returning to her old self. At last, our circumstances seemed better and we could really make it work. She then abruptly quit showing up for our counseling appointments without giving any reason though. She stopped answering me as well, but given her therapist kept me informed, I knew she was progressing. It did not make sense to me. I persisted in attempting to talk to her for weeks, but she would simply blow me off claiming she needed some alone time. At last, after almost 3 months of her avoiding me, I paid her a visit at her parents' house. Her parents disliked me and blamed me for her actions, thus I hadn't done that previously. They thought I was the one who had driven their daughter insane and produced such behavior. Angela had advised me it would be better if I skipped seeing her while she was living with them since it would simply cause more drama, the last thing we wanted. She had been acting aloof and skipping counseling appointments, hence I disregarded that guideline and paid them nevertheless. She seemed indifferent even when she did sporadically come up, and I simply could not understand it. She insisted everything was good whether I tried personally speaking with her, on the phone, or even by text. But her behavior made it abundantly evident she was hiding something from me. When I arrived at her parents' place, I thought she would be there but she wasn't. Her parents slammed the door in my face when I asked where she was and said they were not permitted to tell me. I had a nasty feeling about it since I could tell they were loving the circumstances. So, standing before their house, I made the decision to phone Angela. My paranoia was developing as I tried phoning her several times but she didn't answer. Desperate, I resolved to try to go inside myself by slipping around the house. Knowing her parents typically kept the kitchen door open, I headed around to the backyard. But I didn't have to travel that far since Angela was seated on a swing in the backyard. The bad news was that she was making out with a man I didn't know, not alone. Because that was the most terrible event of my life, that instant is etched in my head. The man went away as soon as he noticed me, and by the time Angela looked around I was already headed back to my car. I was in total shock, hence she caught up with me and tried to stop me but I was not hearing anything she was saying. I shook her off and warned her not to touch me when she tried to grab me. She neglected, thus I got in my automobile and headed home. I told my parents I wanted them to hire a lawyer for me and blocked Angela everywhere as soon as I got home so she wouldn't have an opportunity to explain. When I paid Angela's parents a visit, I told them of what I had recently seen. She never contacted me once again until we had to visit the court-appointed mediator for our divorce settlement. By then I had essentially become a robot, totally shut off emotionally but driven only for the benefit of my girls. Even when I learned Angela was entering her parental rights, I felt nothing. She had decided she wanted to be with the guy, let's call him Sean, who I saw her with instead of with us. He was her friend from childhood. Although they had drifted apart during high school, they got back together when she moved back home with her parents. Apparently she had developed feelings for him. Her parents apparently encouraged this, hence it's likely why they didn't object to her kissing him in their backyard even though she is a married woman with 2 kids. Apparently, they had always wanted her to wind up with Sean, and they were glad Angela was at last choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been capable of doing anything other than that. She wanted to qualify for alimony, hence the divorce was a protracted procedure even though she had been cheating on me. Though it took some time, my attorney and I battled valiantly to ensure she received nothing in the divorce. Since I had been the one paying for everything while she watched TV at home, it was all rightly mine. The divorce was finalized 5 years ago, and we were successful in ensuring she left empty-handed. Though I knew I couldn't break since I had to look after my girls, who had nobody but me, the months I spent handling the divorce were some of the toughest periods I had. I can never enough thank my parents for being there for me when I balanced job and childcare. They are quite helpful and supportive. 5 years have gone by, and although at first the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could happen to me, I am glad for it today. Had I not chosen to leave Angela, I do not see myself where I am right now. Since then, life has given me good treatment. In every sense, I am in a far better place. We moved into a larger house since I make more now and I have no more responsibility for anyone except my girls. Although they live nearby, my parents only pay occasional visits. My daughters are as delighted as could be, and I have friends that love me. All a man needs is that. I am so grateful to the universe that everything is working for me. At least, it was until Angela reappeared a few days ago. The doorbell rang when the children were at school and I was ready to head off to work. Angela was outside standing with a boy less than 3 or 4 years old at her side. This has to be Angela's son, I knew. Her standing at my door startled me, and I was still processing it when she started crying. She came here, she informed me, to atone and right things with me. She declared she was at last ready to be a family once more and offer our marriage another shot. She was returning after all these years, eager to give our marriage another try as if it were up to her to make that choice. It still astounds me. I chose in a short second to shut the door and turn her away since I wanted to avoid whatever this was. I informed her earlier that this was no longer her family. The day she broke off contact with Sean, I had stopped being her husband. She had given up custody of her daughter, hence she had no right to speak to us as her family. The divorce was only a legal requirement. I closed the door after saying that and instructed her to go as I wanted her nowhere close to my property. Though I was very furious and could have cursed her as well, I held back since the small child made me hesitate. For a few minutes after I closed her out, I could hear her crying outside my door. I chose to ignore it. I headed off to work once I confirmed the coast was free. I tried very hard not to think about it as I couldn't afford to let it happen and it would only sap my will. I nearly forgot that Angela had even shown up at my house, but as soon as I got back from work, my parents called me asking why I had sent her away. Angela had been heartbroken, they told me, having contacted them following my closing of the door on her. Since she was in the process of divorcing Sean and at last had an opportunity to make things right with me, my parents disclosed they were the ones who had provided her my new address and urged her to visit me. They informed me Angela had contacted them roughly 1 month ago and that this had been under development for some time. My parents thought it was about time I considered my children since my daughters deserved a mother and in their view Angela was the best mother available. They thus determined she deserved another shot and sent her my address and with guidance on what to say to me. I took great offense at them. Not even asking if I would be comfortable with it, it was not their position to pardon her or determine she deserved another shot. If the children had been home, it may have been quite dangerous, so their pulling of something like this was reckless. They denied that they had made a mistake even as I corrected them. They claimed they had an equal right to decide what was best for the girls since they had taken care of the kids and aided me during my divorce. They also said they still periodically look after them. They thought it pointless whether or not I wanted to fix things with Angela since they had influence in the situation as well. Their belief in that seemed ludicrous to me. My daughters are mine, not hers at the end of the day. Although I value my parents and will always be appreciative of what they did during the divorce, I do not believe it was their place to let Angela re-enter my life. We argued a little, but they felt that by not giving Angela another opportunity, I was the one acting selfishly. They assured me they had done their due research and she was a different woman now, deserving of living with my girls. They claimed it was offensive to consider they would endanger my girls or me even when I informed them she had signed her rights away. Being too conceited to realize that my daughters needed their mother, they said I was destroying their life. It has been a couple days now, and I do not believe I was selfish or out of line. I have given this much thought. Update 1. Angela arrived up to my home with her son approximately a week ago and lately I learned the truth about her connection with her parents. Since I'm still trying to understand it personally and I honestly find it so upsetting not even knowing where to start. How all of them have deceived me without thinking twice is unbelievable. Apparently, my parents had been in communication with Angela all along in addition to telling her my new address. After the divorce, I cut her off from my life, but they hadn't since they thought she would visit at some time. They hardly spoke, just once a month perhaps, but that was plenty for me to feel cheated from. After Angela was handed the divorce papers, Sean had Angela sign away her rights. He had set her an ultimatum. Either keep in contact with her children and battle for custody, therefore leaving him behind, or ditch her family and establish a new life with him. According to my parents, she had had a tough decision. She chose Sean and opted to start a new family with him rather than remain with the one she already knew. Angela had contacted her parents soon after I filed for divorce to explain her circumstances and request their assistance since she still wanted to keep intimate contact with her children. She said she felt driven into a position by both Sean pushing her to completely forsake her children and me advocating for full custody with supervised visits. Her prospects of obtaining partial custody were low even if she battled for custody and opposed Sean because of the circumstances of our divorce and her history of anger management problems. Her time and money seemed wasted fighting for custody. Should she choose to battle, she had a very real risk losing Sean and custody of our girls in the end. My parents entered at that point. Angela visited with them individually and essentially begged them to let her keep contact with our girls. She asked them to be a link between her and the children, thereby helping her out. Angela understood she would lose any visitation rights once she signed away her parental rights. As their grandparents, my parents intended to take advantage of their visiting rights though. By going behind my back to let Angela meet our girls, they effectively misled me for years. Saying Angela's plight resonated with them, they explained their behavior as they couldn't, in good conscience, keep a mother apart from her children. Still, stabbing their own son in the rear seemed to have no effect on their conscience at all. They acknowledged that Angela would be invited over and allowed to spend time with them anytime I left the children off at their place. My parents would pay my daughters toys and candy to be quiet, hence they never told me they were seeing their mother. My girls would tell me they played games with their grandparents and their friend anytime I asked what they had done at their grandparents' house. I always assumed they were referring to my parents' real friends, whom I already knew, but apparently my parents had told my daughters to call their mother the friend should I ask about their day. Although I couldn't believe my girls had been lying to me. I pardoned them since Angela and my parents had obviously coerced and threatened them into silence. It's only for kids. I asked my daughters whether they had been meeting their mother behind my back once I found the truth out from my parents. They began to cry and informed me they felt they would be punished by God should they say anything, so they were unable to say anything. Angela and my dad have to have really hammered it into their minds that telling me the truth would have disastrous results. They had been so evasive and covert all along for this reason. For never asking my girls which of their parents' friends they had been seeing, I also felt like a bad father. I never would have known. It could have been someone deadly simply. But since I am receiving a restraining order against all of them, I am ending this right now. Since my parents emailed me confessing everything following our argument, I already had written evidence. They thought the email would help me to understand Angela's desperation to be a mother to her daughters while juggling her relationship with Sean. Though all it accomplished was to prove they were all lying to me and I couldn't trust anyone anymore, they believed it would make me forgive everyone involved. Angela signed away her parental rights and had to sneak about to meet the children like it was a crime, all because Sean wanted her to have no contact with her former family. Which is ironic. Originally meant to be her one true love, all of it was for nothing as they are divorcing. Though according to my parents Sean now wants nothing to do with any of them, they even had a son together. Angela didn't want to depart since their son had just begun kindergarten and she had started working again. He got a job offer and is leaving in a few months. Their arguments had been getting more intense for some time. 3 months ago, Sean told her he was done and headed off to accept the job. Though all this disclosure did was make me feel as though justice had at last been done, it was meant to make me sorry for Angela. My attorney has already advised me. The petition for restraining orders has been filed. My daughters and I have also had a decent conversation on everything. I warned them they would never see their mother or grandparents once again going forward. They seem good right now, but we are still working through it in therapy since I know this will be challenging for them. For the past 5 years, they most certainly have found it difficult. This ends immediately. Update 2. Hi everyone. I greatly appreciate all the attention and help. I truly appreciate all the wonderful blessings and messages directed towards my girls. Angela and my parents should show up in court in a few days. They have been issued restraining orders. I have blocked them on every platform, thus I have no idea how they feel about any of this. I have also advised friends not to talk to them should they try to get in touch. I have been working from home for the past few days and have added security around my place. I told the school where my girls go. I first wanted not to send the children to school for a few days, but I wanted their education not to suffer as a result. Their teachers are now monitoring them, none save me is permitted to pick them up after school. Things have so far been nice. I hope they will keep away once the restraining orders are issued. Update 3. Hello, here is a brief update. But we obtained restraining orders. Angela, my parents and Sean have to keep their distance from me and my girls for the next 5 years, else, they will suffer major penalties. The previous time I saw them, they appeared really hostile, hence I am maintaining all the security precautions for a period since I want to avoid any risk. Regular family counseling sessions are attended by my daughters and me. I think we will make great progress in the next months. To be honest, we have already advanced really much. Right now I just want my daughters to be happy. That is all. Kindly keep forwarding us your best wishes, we really need them. Now, on to the next story, Story 4. After my dad remarried, he neglected me and prioritized his new family, making me feel like a guest in his home. Am I the jerk for resenting him? When I was younger, I had a great relationship with my father. My parents split when I was an infant, although I spent the week with my mother and weekends with my father. My father and I were like best friends and we had a set schedule every weekend. We'd grab 5 Redbox DVDs to watch over the weekend, go fishing, play soccer, and bike to a hidden playground near the zoo. I was also used to my father constantly having different girlfriends, none of whom lasted more than 2 weeks. The only one who stayed longer was a woman I admired, who was there for 2 years. She left my father when I was 10. Despite this, my relationship with my father remained unchanged until I was 12. When he met his current wife. This woman had 2 children, one older and one younger than myself. They moved into my father's apartment after just 2 weeks. My room was already small, but my tiny mattress and 3 small plastic drawers were pushed into the corner to make way for my daughter's bunk bed and dresser. Before I knew it, they began putting my bed in a closet while I wasn't present and frequently forgot to take it out when I came to visit. When my father moved into a larger house, the older sister received her own room, whereas I had to share one with the younger sister every weekend. The 3 small drawers I had were quickly reduced to just one because my younger sister wanted the other 2 for toys. I gradually began to visit my father less frequently. Things got extremely bad when my father got his girlfriend pregnant. After a year, they married, and I had no idea for a month because he hadn't told me. I also had no idea my newborn half-sister was born until weeks after she returned home from the hospital. To make his new family happy, my father began indulging them and stopped paying child support to me and my mother. His non-working wife cooks, cleans, and shops, while my father pays for her older daughter's college tuition. The younger daughter is the epitome of a 10-year-old Sephora child. My half-sister is still a toddler, but she is plainly spoiled and hates the word no. My father and I had a routine that is no longer in place. My stepfather has been with my mother since I was 5. Apparently, though I don't remember it, I once called him dad. And as a result, my father told me not to love him like a father since he isn't my father. I believe this is why I began acting as if I despised my stepfather. I had no idea why I felt that way toward him because he has always been nothing but nice to me. In recent years, I've felt considerably closer to him. He feels like the father my biological father should be. Over time, my father began to treat me differently. He rants to me about his political opinions, conspiracy theories regarding aliens, and other topics. He also boasts about his new business and family. If I try to share anything with him, he gets upset and shuts me down, instead continuing with his own story. It appears that he now considers me a friend rather than his daughter. In recent years, I've learned that my parents' divorce wasn't because they weren't compatible, but because my father cheated on my mother while visiting his family in Canada. I am now 15 years old and have changed drastically from the person my birth father remembers. I used to enjoy the beach and soccer, but now I prefer music, reading and writing. Since 2022 I have written and published 2 books, and I am currently working on the 3rd in my series. My stepfather believes in my dreams and loves me so much that he brags about me to friends and family, referring to me as his daughter. He also has a biological daughter, who I adore like a true sister, but she lives up north with her boyfriend, so I don't see her very frequently. Nonetheless, I adore them more than my biological father and half-sister, with whom I'm actually linked. My father blames me for not phoning him, but given how he has treated me recently, I don't feel like I owe him that. I also go months without seeing him anymore since I no longer feel at ease in that place. Especially because the bed I sleep on is actually their guest bed. I am a guest at my birth father's house. Because of this, I resent my father. I haven't informed anyone how I feel, so no one is calling me a jerk, but I'm wondering if I am. My father appears content with his new family, and I'm left wondering whether it's terrible that I'm not glad for him. Am I the jerk? Update 1. Hello. I wrote a post a few months ago about how my father has stopped treating me as his daughter now that he has a new family. Not much has changed since then, but here's an update nevertheless. Since my initial post, I've only been to my father's place once. It's safe to say that I'm just an uncomfortable guest in their house. I should begin by mentioning that whenever I go a few months without visiting, my father attempts to appear innocent. He phones me every Friday to inquire when he should pick me up. I never answer because he always calls while I'm in class or studying. So he phones my mother. But because he never asks in advance, I usually have plans on weekends with my cousins, friends, or just writing. As I am still working on my 3rd novel, which requires a lot of focus that I can't get at his house. Actually, I'm just going to name him Eric. He hasn't been much of a father figure to me, unlike my stepfather. Anyway, my mother decided I'd go over to his house, despite the fact that Eric hasn't paid child support in over 2 years, and I despise coming there. My mother suggests that I pay him a visit every now and then to keep him out of trouble with the courts. She sometimes confuses me, claiming he's a deadbeat, but also that he's a loving father who deserves to be respected. However, given the circumstances, I'm very convinced nothing would have changed because I seldom visit him and he doesn't pay child support anyhow. In instance, one Christmas, he purchased and wrapped a large number of new items for his family. When I was visiting him a few weeks before Christmas, he drove to Walmart to get his wife some food. He handed me $200 and said, "Merry Christmas, buy yourself something, and the rest can be used for child support or whatever." I purchased 2 books, but the remainder of the money, which was supposed to be child support, was far from what he owed. I've told my mother that I'd be happy if he lost custody of me and my stepfather adopted me, but she feels that's too severe, saying, He's still your father, he deserves your respect and love. Now it was the weekend, and I paid him a visit. From the moment Eric picked me up, he only talked about his new family. He discussed the older sister and her boyfriend, the younger sister and her shopping, and my half-sister, who can now speak a little. I remained mute until he asked me about school. When I responded, he became upset and launched into a conspiracy theory rant. I ignored him for the rest of the drive. The rest of the weekend wasn't any better. The older sister did what she always does when I visit. She locked herself in her room and only came out when I left the home or went to the bathroom to avoid having to talk to me. The younger sister had a friend over, and her friend threw her belongings on my bed and sat on it because that is where she sleeps when she has sleepovers. Eric's wife did a bad job of concealing her displeasure with my presence. She was often taken aback by my presence because Eric had not informed her in advance, so she couldn't argue. Eric spent most of the weekend taking me and my half-sister to a playground where she could run around with her friends. I sat on a seat to read, but I didn't have much time for myself because Eric kept leaving and telling me to keep an eye on my half-sister, who is a wild and fussy child. I am not a babysitter, and while I am wonderful with children, that doesn't mean I relish devoting my own time to caring for them when they are not my duty. I had to spend 2 days in either utter commotion or discomfort, and I told my mother that I didn't want to go over there anymore. She said everything was all right and that she would not force me to leave, but I don't believe her because she has said it before. I don't have someone to talk to about it and the whole scenario is freaking me out. I don't recall my father ever being as happy as he is today, yet I still feel like I should be glad for him. I don't know what to do, so any guidance would be appreciated. Everyone who posted on my last article claimed I'm not a jerk and Eric isn't acting like a father should, but he still reaches out from time to time and calls me his baby girl, whom he adores. I almost cry when he says that because it reminds me of how we used to be. Am I overthinking this or overreacting? What shall I do? Am I a jerk for not being pleased for my father? You should inform your mother that the more she compels you to go to your father's, the worse your relationship with her will get, because she is not listening to what you want or how you feel. You should also tell her that you no longer trust what she says, because she has previously stated that she will not force you to leave, but she does anyway. If you can't talk to your mother, talk to your stepfather about it and see if he can help. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's only been a few days since I last posted. Since then, I've followed most of your advice and spoken with my mother about not wanting to be compelled to visit Eric, my sperm donor, as most of you referred to him. Long story short, I'm not certain she won't keep sending me over to Eric's place, but she did end up sending him long texts chastising him for not treating me properly and ordering him to step up and pay child support. He didn't respond to her, so I took some other advice and sent him a lengthy text outlining how I felt about his treatment of me over the prior few years. As soon as I sent the text, he called to shout at me. He called me spoiled and overdramatic, stating it's my fault we don't have a relationship because I don't visit or communicate with him anymore. And because I cited the unpaid child support, he accused me of merely asking for money. I almost sobbed throughout that phone call and ended up hanging up on him. He also wrote some angry texts to my mother, but later that day, he left a voicemail on my phone saying, "Money is so tight for me right now. I'm completely broke. You are aware of my feelings for you, correct?" The trouble is, I know it's a lie since I always see my younger stepsister posting TikTok videos showing off the Sephora and other expensive items dad gets her. I believe I'm done trying. Some of you suggested I seek my stepfather for help. I wish I could, but when I asked my mother again if he could adopt me, she replied something that broke me completely. Apparently, my stepfather has stated that he does not feel he should adopt me. My stepfather is really nice and compassionate, but he is also incredibly non-confrontational, and he believes that adopting me would be a slap in the face to Eric. Also, to clear up any confusion from the comments on my last update, my parents' divorce was not due to his current wife. My parents separated when I was a baby, and Eric resided in Canada, where he moved from woman to girlfriend before moving here. When I was 12, Dad met and knocked up his wife, Alejandra, and married her without informing me until a month after their courthouse wedding. In case you're wondering, my age is 15. It feels silly that I am experiencing this level of stress at my age, and I don't feel comfortable discussing it with anyone. I can't talk to my stepfather since he's usually working, and when he comes home, my mother is also around, which I dislike talking to. She often tells me I'm too young to feel the way I do. The last time I attempted to address my mental health with Mom, I asked if I could begin therapy, and she said therapists are stupid, and I should simply talk to her or pray to God if something was wrong. I'm not religious and discussing serious issues with her makes me very uncomfortable. It's not that I don't love her. After all, she's my mother, but she's quite intense and scary. My father has not contacted me again after his voicemail. Frankly, I don't want to think about him for a long time. If he suddenly understands how severely he has messed up with me and apologizes, maybe I will try to repair our connection. My stepfather may not wish to adopt me, but he still refers to me as his daughter rather than simply his stepdaughter, and I actually feel loved by him. I adore his parents like they are my own grandparents, and his entire family is kind and loving. I might post another update if anything else happens, but for now, I'm going to concentrate on school and my books. Maybe now that I understand Eric no longer cares about me, I can finally focus on writing my third novel. I dedicated my first book to him, and I do not regret it. I dedicated that work to the father he once was. It's unlikely he'll ever read it because he doesn't think it's sensible for me to want to be a writer, but I don't care, I'm done. Thank you to everyone who offered advice and assured me that I wasn't a jerk. Update 3. There were so many individuals asking identical questions that it was overwhelming, so I didn't react to any of them immediately. But first, I'll answer those queries before moving on to the real cause for this update. A number of you suggested that I talk to a school counselor or whatever. The trouble is, I do virtual homeschool, and my mother works from home a lot, so I'm honestly too terrified to try it. Plus, even if I talk to my counselor without my mother present, I don't trust adults to keep such things private. I know that seems silly and worrisome, but it's just how my mind works. A number of you also suggested that I bring up the therapy issue with my mother again, but I know it won't work. My mother does not believe in treatment and feels that praying to God or having her preach the Bible to me will resolve everything. As for my stepfather, I adore him and see him as my genuine father, even if he refuses to adopt me. But he is also no help with the treatment issue because he constantly agrees with anything my mother says to avoid arguments. But I'm doing well right now, and I believe things will improve soon. I believe this because I am confident that my mother will eventually petition for sole custody and court-ordered child support. When my parents split, they arranged for custody and child support amongst themselves. The agreement was that I would spend weekends with my father, and he would pay my mother $100 per week. I believe my father just kept that commitment to keep himself looking nice until he could complete his legalization procedure in the United States, as he was a Canadian immigrant. When he was legalized, he stopped paying child support and began indulging his new family. Anyway, I visited my father's place last weekend. This time, my mother did not compel me, and I chose to go because I wanted to give my father one final chance. He took me up from my mother's place and we weren't even down the block when we started fighting. I was excitedly telling him about my business idea of making book boxes and selling books with DIY necklaces and hand-painted bookmarks that matched the book covers. He called my concept dumb, unprofitable, and a waste of money and time. It was an hour's trip to his place, and he became political or upset at everything I said. When I told him I was thinking about applying to institutions like Harvard or the University of Chicago in the future, he became enraged about all the dangerous Cuban and Mexican immigrants in Chicago. He also claimed that Harvard is a waste of time and only famous because rich people go there. I ended up roaring back at him, telling him that he couldn't be so arrogant about non-white immigrants when he was once an immigrant himself. Also, I've never understood why my father is so bigoted toward Hispanics, despite the fact that both my mother and his current wife are Latina. He went on one rant after another, and I was so tired of it that, instead of remaining silent like I usually do, I objected. Because of this, my father spent the entire weekend talking about my bad attitude. I told my mom about everything. I believe the final nail in the coffin that prompted my mother to seek sole custody was when I informed her about my father's rant about the differences between men and women. I ended up memorizing and writing down everything he said, then texting it to my mother. I implored her not to talk to him about it, but she was furious with him. Here's some of what he said. 99% of women want to latch on to rich men. Nearly all women are greedy and unloyal. Men don't like successful and independent women because they're prideful and bossy. It's more important for a wife to respect her husband than for him to respect her. Or it's wrong for wives to make more than their husbands. And so much more. He smiled and added, "But you're the exception, pretty girl." There was so much more that happened just last weekend, such as him saying that some of my guy friends aren't real men because they're gay, and attempting to convince me that my summer volunteering opportunity in the Dominican Republic is a bad idea because the people there are different, despite the fact that my mother's family is from there. I won't go into every annoying thing he did, but I'm finally done. This was his final chance, and he wasted it. I simply wanted to mention that I'm quite sure my mother isn't sending me over there anymore. She spent the entire morning looking for my birth certificate, wondering if she needed it for court. She wants full custody, and if my father paid child support, it would greatly assist me prepare for college. He currently owes a significant amount of child support. Also, I didn't include the names of my books in the postings because I didn't want a bunch of internet strangers to see my social media tags on the back of the book, but I will share the titles with anyone who directly messages me. If anything else happens, I'll most likely post another update. Hopefully, my next report will come after we've been to court. You are not the jerk. Divorce and parenting are difficult. Your biological father sounds like a jerk. He is entirely failing you. I understand why your mother and stepfather want you to establish a relationship with your biological father. It is one of the things parents are urged to do throughout divorce because it is usually better for the children. If your parents obtained a court order granting your biological father weekend visitation, your mother could face legal consequences if you did not visit him. Your stepfather cannot adopt you unless your biological father's parental rights are dissolved by a court, and if your biological father challenges it, things will get messy. Your stepfather's reluctance to undertake such a legal struggle while you are still considered a minor makes sense. I'd wager that it has nothing to do with his affections for you. He expresses his affection for you and your position in his heart every day. He is already your father, so you don't need him to adopt you. Please do not let his fears about the legal situation make you believe he loves you any less. I'm delighted your mother is going for both full custody and child support. Your biological father has to be held accountable. I'm so sad that you lost your biological father. He may be alive, but he is no longer the parent he once was. However, keep in mind that you played no part in this. He's just focusing all of his energy on the woman who, let's say, meets his physical wants, and leaving it at that. It's a regrettably prevalent issue. Now to the next story 5. Forgotten and excluded from my parents' wedding. After 25 years together, I exposed their neglect on social media and revealed the truth. I, 17F, was just forgotten on my parents' wedding day. My parents have been together for approximately 25 years but never married. That's why when my father, 50M, proposed to my mother, 49F, on their anniversary, which they had always celebrated on the day my mother discovered she was pregnant with my eldest sister, despite the fact that they had previously been together, everyone, including me, was overjoyed and celebrated the occasion. This happened way back in February. They moved right into wedding preparations, deciding early on that they would hold a modest affair in Hawaii, with only their closest family and friends for an intimate ceremony. Almost immediately, my mother asked my sister, 25F, to be her maid of honor, and my father asked my brother, 22M, to be his groomsman. I was not surprised nor angered by this. My sister had always been a mommy's girl, and they both enjoyed spending time together shopping and socializing, so they had a strong bond. The same goes for my father and brother. They were often playing football together and messing about with cars. My father even coached my brother's team in middle school. That usually left me as the odd one out. I attempted to participate in my family's interests and groups, but was consistently turned down. Maybe they sensed that my interest in their activities wasn't genuine, or maybe they just didn't mind. Regardless, I was used to being the last and least important member of my family. Mom had a sister, and Dad had a brother. My parents had each other, and my 2 siblings were closer than they had ever been to me, leaving me feeling lonely and alienated in my own house. During the wedding preparations, it was suggested that I be the flower girl, but my sister thought that role would be more suited to her daughter, 3F, so that proposal was swiftly dropped. Later, my maternal grandmother offered that I read a poem or give a little statement during the ceremony, but both of my parents declined because they wanted the wedding to be low-key and didn't believe a cheesy and sappy speech would match their vision. Those were their exact words. I was still fine with it all, even though it hurt to know that I would be the only family member not in the wedding party or given any role at all on the big day. As the wedding date approached, my parents and siblings were increasingly involved in the arrangements. I observed my mother did not invite me to dress shopping, and whenever they discussed the site or the occasion, I was excluded. So I decided to keep quiet and see if they would understand I wasn't involved in any way, waiting for them to ask me something about the wedding. But that never occurred. The wedding was scheduled 3 weeks ago, toward the end of August. My mother casually asked me the day before their departure whether I had my luggage ready because we couldn't be late at the airport. I honestly informed her that I had not prepared anything. She looked perplexed for a second before snapping at me for not being prepared. I immediately asked her if I had a ticket, and her face turned pale. Yes, they hadn't even purchased my ticket, and I'm not sure if I had a room or any other amenities once there. Even though I was the only member in my family without a steady income, I work as a part-time babysitter. My parents had purchased first-class tickets for my siblings and a couple of other friends who were attending the wedding, but they had overlooked me. My mother urged me not to make a big deal about it and that they could simply find me a low-cost, last-minute ticket from a budget airline. I just said, then what do I even have to wear to the ceremony? She went shopping with sis months ago for her and all of the other female guests' outfits, but I was not included. That's when my father walked in and ordered me to suck it up, claiming I'd never been a girly girl, so I could wear whatever. I was upset because, even though I'm not the most feminine girl on the earth, I would have liked to be a part of my parents' wedding. It wasn't just the outfit, it was the fact that I had been excluded from almost everything for months. We all got into a fight, with them calling me entitled and accusing me of making myself little on purpose so they would forget about me, as if that was a sufficient reason to ignore their child. They ended up warning me that if I kept this attitude, I might as well skip the entire event. I replied with a defiant fine, and went into my room. The next morning, they all departed for Hawaii without me. The ceremony was tiny, but they all shared numerous photos on Instagram and Facebook about how amazing and magical the entire week was. People noticed that I wasn't in any of the images and began asking my parents why. They responded that, unfortunately, I got COVID before the trip and had to stay home. I made a throwaway because I didn't want to give out my personal information, which is freely accessible on my real account. Unfortunately, this is not a fake. You are the first to bring up the affair theory in my mind, and I'm not sure what to make of it. I hope this is not true. Commenter: the wedding party and other guests received first-class tickets, but their youngest child did not. How is this possible? Then they don't rectify it by buying you a first-class ticket but rather an economy ticket because it's cheaper. Did you even have accommodations? No dress either, just wear whatever? Now it is your fault that they are careless. Hell no, these parents stink. I believe when she started a cheaper airline, she meant it was more likely that I would arrive on time, as their aircraft was allegedly fully booked. Again, I'm not sure about the accommodations, they made no mention of them. I just know that they all stayed at the same hotel where the ceremony took place. Commenter: instead of fighting for minimum attention from her parents and siblings, she should focus her energies on seeking other sources of fulfillment. I really don't have the strength to do anything these days. I'm starting college later this year and the plan was to live at home because it's not far away, but now I just want to leave. I'm not sure how though. I don't have enough savings or a job right now, and the thought of going out and getting one feels overwhelming. I don't want to drop out, but I want to go somewhere else. I wrote this yesterday because I needed to rant, but I didn't want to start an additional controversy, so it's anonymous. Commenter: if she is in college, she should proceed with the emancipation process. Emancipation will save her a fortune on her schooling, and I guarantee you that her horrible parents did not plan to benefit her in any way. Before all of this, I planned to attend college in my hometown. It's a terrific college downtown, and I was overjoyed to be accepted. A couple of my high school buddies are also going there and will live at home. I was saving to buy a car for simpler transportation, and they were going to pay for my tuition and other expenses, but now I simply want to leave this house. Commenter: stay strong. Do not let them get under your skin. Even if you have to find roommates or move in with a friend, depart as soon as you feel secure with your money. There are Facebook groups and other resources for finding roommates, particularly in college locations. I know that's what I should do. I have a buddy who is moving into a studio apartment near our campus, but I don't have a job right now and don't want to be a burden to her. She and I are close, so I am sure she would invite me to move in with her, but I don't want to be a burden. Also, I don't have a job right now, so I can't pay rent, which is something else I need to work out. Update 1, thank you very much. A few days earlier, I couldn't get out of bed, and my family's comments had convinced me that I was to blame for all that had happened. But after seeing the answers to my article and all of your support, I felt reassured with my acts and thoughts for my family. I'm still dealing with feelings of guilt and melancholy, but anytime I start to spiral, I remember how much this community of strangers has supported me and I try to calm myself down with your comments. Thanks to your opinion and suggestions, I finally decided to call my grandmother and tell her the whole thing. Before I continue, I should clarify that my grandmother, 77F, did not attend the wedding. I stated it in the comments, but I feel compelled to include it here as well. She lives a few states away and has mobility concerns, so she no longer travels. We went to see her around Easter, and she suggested that I read a poem during the wedding, but that was the last time I saw her in person before all of this. She has always been very affectionate to me and has previously chastised my parents for their favoritism, but she is unable to play a more active role in my upbringing because she lives so far away. I'm constantly apprehensive about troubling her because of her age and health. She had a mild stroke a few years ago and is now back to normal, but I'm still concerned. Anyway, I contacted her and explained everything about the wedding, even how my parents didn't even purchase me a ticket to accompany them. She came to the same conclusion as the majority of the commenters. It was simply unthinkable that they had forgotten and done it on purpose. I cried on the phone with her, explaining how I was feeling, how this had been going on forever, how I felt in the aftermath, and most importantly, my need to go. She was really lovely and soothing to me, telling me that I didn't have anything else to worry about because she had my back completely. She told me to take it easy but make plans for the future, and she promised to help me. After that chat, which lasted around 2 hours, I felt better and decided to take her advice. I began working on a plan for the upcoming academic year. I have a friend who is going to rent a studio near our future campus. She has a wonderful relationship with her parents, but she has 5 younger siblings and wants to be more independent, so she opted to move out. I asked if I might live with her temporarily and pay rent as soon as I acquired a job. She immediately agreed and advised me not to worry about rent or anything else until I was in a better situation. We had a good cry together when I told her about my parents' wedding incident. This happened a few days ago and I had planned to post an update at the time. However, my grandmother called my dad and siblings to chastise them on how they were treating me. My brother texted me later with a half-hearted apology, stating he didn't realize I wasn't included and simply assumed I wouldn't enjoy the vacation. He also accused me of uploading the photo solely to cause trouble. My sister, on the other hand, berated me, telling me that I kept making my problems public and blaming them on the family although they were all innocent. My folks have been acting strangely since returning from their trip. They berated me and were outraged at first, but since then, we've just ignored each other. After my grandmother called them, they came into my room and told me that if I wanted to put this whole thing to rest, I needed to stop talking about it. They say it would have all been over if I'd only kept my mouth shut. I requested them to leave my room and contacted my grandmother again to explain what had transpired. She then told me that she and my uncle, my mother's older brother, had bought plane tickets to see me. I was honestly concerned about this because my grandmother's health isn't great, and this level of work is too much for her. I understand how difficult it is for her to get on a plane, so I attempted to discourage her from coming and assured her that everything would be fine. But she refused to listen, telling me that she was overdue for a chat with my parents and wanted to see me. I'm worried about her and feel like I pushed her to take this lengthy, difficult trip because of me. I want nothing more than to hug her right now, yet I'm concerned about her. At the very least, my uncle will accompany her, but I hope she does not overwork herself or that nothing bad happens to her, because that would shatter me. They arrive tomorrow and haven't notified my parents about their vacation. My grandmother begged me to keep it a secret until she arrived. I'm hoping she'll be able to persuade my parents of the error in their ways, or at the very least, assist me in breaking the news to them that I'll be moving out shortly and intend to maintain no contact. I'm concerned about her having to do so much for me and troubling her, but I also admire and love her for everything she does. Update 2. Many people have messaged me and commented on the post, and I haven't had time to answer to anyone until today, so I apologize. You've all been so kind and caring, and it's been genuinely eye-opening and horrifying to realize how many people have experienced similar stories of neglect and abuse. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to send some kind thoughts to this online stranger. This update will be lengthy, so I apologize in advance. I'll just resume where I left off. My grandmother called to say she was coming here to see me and help me out. I was quite concerned since my grandmother has a difficult time traveling, so taking this trip would put her under a lot of stress, and I felt responsible for her because I was the one who contacted her. She came early Monday morning with my uncle and I went to pick her up at the airport. Not going to lie, it was an extremely powerful and emotional experience. As soon as I saw her, I went to her arms and burst into tears. I'm not sure if I could tell her anything because I was crying so hard. I had so many things to say. Thank you for coming. For being so kind to me, and for having my back. I regret forcing you to take this vacation. I feel terrible at home. I'm not sure if my parents love me, but I know you do. Am I an affair child? When I saw her, I was struck by all of this, as well as remorse and fear. But she hugged me tightly in her arms and assured me that everything would be fine. My uncle hugged us as well. I'm not sure how long we stayed like this, but it must have been a while before my uncle urged us to get going. We got a taxi and proceeded to their hotel. My grandmother had watery eyes, and I could feel her heavy breathing, which terrified me, yet she hugged me and smiled the entire time. She had rented a double room for me to stay with her for those days, and once they were settled in and I was calmer, we sat down, and I poured my heart out to them. Years of neglect, emotional abuse, how horrible I felt after the wedding, but also how I had felt for years. I stated how my parents were attempting to make me feel guilty for everything that had happened, and how terrified I was about my future, but that my number one priority was to get out of the house, even if it meant sacrificing my academics. I informed them that I had made plans to move in with a buddy and was seeking work. I also told them about this post and how several people assumed I was an affair child, and I admitted that I was starting to doubt that myself. It was a lot, and I could tell they were both deeply touched by what I was saying, but they continued to soothe me and make me feel safe enough to open up. After I expressed my anxieties, my grandmother reassured me that I had nothing to worry about and that she would always be there for me. First, she assured me that I was not an affair child. She informed me that both of my parents were overjoyed when my mother became pregnant with me, and she knew that adultery would be a deal breaker for my mother, as she imagined it would be for my father. Apparently, the favoritism started when I was 3 or 4 years old, when my parents were continually complaining about having a young child in the family. They were frustrated because they could transport my older siblings to their activities but not me. I was also quite shy and a bit of a crybaby, which they could not tolerate, setting me apart from my siblings. She told me that my parents had saved more than enough for my college. They're pretty wealthy, so that had never been an issue for me, despite my recent concern that they could take the funds away from me. She told me that if they ever tried to refuse to pay for my education, she would handle it, and she would not allow me to drop out due to financial constraints. She also offered to help me with rent and an allowance so that I could move out. She was quite giving, and I thanked her, but I also mentioned that this experience had been eye-opening. I had no idea how wealthy I had been monetarily my entire life. Despite their flaws, my parents have spoiled me financially. I attended private school, received a huge monthly allowance, and owned a car for years, and they never complained about my expenses. Seeing the experiences presented here made me understand how fortunate I was and how relying on them put me vulnerable to losing everything. I told her that I wanted to be independent, not just from my parents, but from everyone. I feel as if I need to learn to stand on my own. To be honest, writing this and reading the experiences of individuals in truly bad situations makes me feel like a spoiled brat my entire life. My grandmother demanded I take her assistance until I no longer needed it, and I accepted, but I still want to look for work and try to make it on my own. We relaxed at the hotel for a bit because we were all tired from the morning, but in the afternoon, we took a cab to my place. When I stepped through the door, my parents were completely surprised to see my grandmother and uncle with me. Before they could say anything, my grandmother urged me to go pack my basics while they spoke with my parents. I rushed upstairs and overheard my grandmother and uncle berating my parents for everything they had put me through. At first I could hear my parents defending themselves, but they finally quieted down. When I arrived downstairs with 2 suitcases and a backpack containing my most crucial belongings, they were all in the living room. My father turned crimson red and my mother sobbed like a kid. When she spotted me, she stretched her arms toward me, apologizing, but I simply responded, "Save it," in the coldest tone I could conjure. My father told me I didn't have to be a jerk, and both my uncle and grandmother ordered him to stop up. I exited the premises at that point and waited for the cab outside. Back at the motel, my grandmother told me that I would not have to return to them. She informed me that my parents had never questioned my college tuition and had intended to throw me an elaborate birthday party to compensate for the wedding fiasco. They even planned to give me a car as an apology for everything. But my grandmother was having none of it because it was evident to her that they were just attempting to save face. She believed they were making these decisions on the fly, and that a party and a car wouldn't compensate for everything they had put me through. My mother's heart apparently broke when my grandmother informed her that I had even questioned my paternity. My mother burst into tears, but my grandmother informed her that given their actions, what more could they expect after constantly excluding me from family functions since I was a child? My grandmother said she would make sure they made the payments for my school unless I decided to cut relations with them and have her pay till I could pay for myself. I asked her to do that. I felt horrible since I didn't believe it was her obligation, but I really don't want anything else from my parents anymore. Although my grandmother is very well off, she is not as affluent as my parents, but she informed me that everything was okay and that whatever went to me would be deducted from my mother's inheritance. The next day, I went with my buddy, her parents, and my grandmother to inspect the studio where we planned to relocate. When my grandmother arrived, she said, "Absolutely not." I knew from the photographs that the studio was small and dusty, but when we discovered water damage and mildew in the bathroom and kitchen, as well as rust on the old equipment, it was evident that it wasn't livable. I was aware of all of this previously and thought I could deal with it for a time, but what really changed our minds was when the grown-ups pointed out that the studio was street level in a terrible neighborhood, in a building that didn't appear particularly safe. There were bullet holes on the walls, which I had not noticed until my friend's father pointed them out. Grandma and my friend's parents offered to help us find an apartment in a better area and cover the fees. Both my friend and I want to be self-sufficient, but we realize that with potential minimum wage employment in such a high-demand region, we would be unable to get anything better on our own. So the plan is to hunt for a 2-bedroom apartment, and my buddy and I will pay what we intended for the studio, with her parents and my grandmother covering the rest. I know I'm still spoiled to anticipate aid from my grandmother, but after seeing the studio in person, I honestly wouldn't have felt secure there. My friend's parents, who were aware of what I was going through, invited me to live with them until we found a suitable apartment, for which I'm really thankful. I've been staying in the motel with Granny since she leaves in a few days. Apparently, my friend, her parents, and my grandmother discussed this before coming to me to ensure I had a safe place to stay until we moved into the apartment, which has yet to be discovered. I teared up as I thanked them, seeing how many people had rallied around me to give assistance. Since then, I've started moving some of my belongings from my parents' house and setting up my space at a friend's. Every time I return, my mother cries and apologizes, and my father has also apologized, but I stay distant and cold toward them. My sister called to say her mother was a wreck and that I was a D-bag for what I had done. Before she could say anything else, I hung up and blocked her. I was about to block my brother as well, but I noticed he had sent me a very long message in which he apologized repeatedly for all he had done and for not comprehending how horribly our parents treated me. He stated he had been doing a lot of self-reflection since Grandma called and realized he was mistaken in presuming I wasn't on the trip because I didn't want to go. He also regretted allowing our parents to exclude me for so many years. I replied briefly, thanking him for his thoughts but stating that I need space and am not ready to accept his apology just yet. I believe he is sincere because he has never been mean to me in the same manner that my sister has, only distant. However, I feel compelled to keep him at a distance for the time being. Keeping in touch with my family feels like the correct thing to do while everything is still so new. Maybe in the future he will show me that he is just as vicious as everyone else, and I will block him. However, as long as he respects my boundaries, I feel better not cutting him off totally. I've also scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specializes in neglected teenagers, and my first preliminary consultation is next week, which will be sponsored by my grandmother. This makes me even more eager to get a job to relieve her of the load, despite the fact that she has repeatedly stated that she is willing to do everything for me. That's where things are right now. I'm not sure if I'll blog again. Maybe after I start classes or move into my apartment, but for now, I'm just trying to spend time with my grandmother and uncle. I'm working on learning to grow and overcoming the feelings of guilt and depression that have haunted me for so long. I'd like to thank this community again for being so nice and helpful to me. To everyone who has messaged me with their own personal stories of being kicked out or having to make it on your own at such a young age, you've made me feel a lot less alone. You've also shown me that things can improve if I work hard for them. I feel lucky because I have such an incredible support system in my grandmother, uncle and buddy, but you're right. Reaching out has been the finest move I could have made. Opening out about my sentiments to those that love me, as well as all of my internet pals, has genuinely saved my life. So thank you, I am more appreciative than words can describe. Commenter, I'm curious. When you returned to collect your belongings, what exactly did your folks say? Oopie. Every time I've gone there, my mother has been crying and saying I'm sorry, again and again, but I haven't talked to her, so she hasn't expressed anything in particular. I also haven't given her a chance. My father has largely remained silent, staring at me whenever I enter and depart. When he apologized, he said something along the lines of, "I'm sorry for everything," without acknowledging any fault on his part. I'm not sure if they're shocked by all that's going on. I'm overwhelmed and haven't had time to digest it all, or if they don't believe they've done anything wrong and are simply acting for grandma. I honestly do not know. Commenter, don't chop off your nose to spite your face when it comes to college money. Your parents are responsible for paying the entire bill. Don't burden yourself with that expense when they can cover it. It's the absolute minimum they can do. OOP, my grandmother has already told me that it is unacceptable for me not to attend college simply because my parents will not pay, and she will not allow me to take out student loans either. I asked if she would co-sign, and she flatly refused, saying she'd rather pay herself than see me upset about money. I will not sacrifice my education because of my parents, but I will take advantage of this opportunity with my grandmother. I'd rather not receive money from my parents because I know they'll hold it over me for the rest of my life, as if I owed them. I'm really fortunate that my grandmother will take care of this, even though I feel I don't deserve her. Commenter. I hope you don't feel bad for coming from a wealthy family. You are not privileged. You appear to be more self-aware than many others from your upbringing. Working and living separately from your family will allow you to explore the world. I honestly don't believe you're a pampered, affluent child. Working for what we need develops character and teaches us a variety of skills, including how to deal with tough people, the value of each hour and dollar earned, collaboration, societal institutions, and more. I'm pleased you have a safety net with your grandmother, and don't listen to anyone who would judge you for it. Many of us live paycheck to paycheck, and I would not want that on anyone just starting out in life. If you ever want to give us an update on how things are doing, I will absolutely read it. Thank you for sharing this terrible period in your life. OOP, I feel more than guilty, angry at my heritage and how ignorant I've been my entire life about my privileges. This self-awareness you stated has only recently come to light for me. When I initially clashed with my parents, I didn't think about money or how I'd support myself. That's always been a given for me, which is wonderful considering I'm still under 18. But after posting here and reading posts from others who have had to deal with the financial ramifications of being neglected, cutting off their family, or leaving home at an early age, I realized how out of touch I had been. Now to the next story. 6. Crazy mother-in-law and father-in-law arrested after attempting to trespass on our land and being attacked by bees on the neighbor's property. I reside in a very rural place on a tiny ranch that has been in my family since my grandfather's day. We are around 15 minutes from the nearest little town. When I say small, I actually mean small. My wife and I met by happenstance around 6 years ago when I stopped in town to pick up some groceries. She gave off a tomboy feeling and had recently arrived in the region. She had recently finished school and discovered that she despised city life and wished to return to something more familiar. I will get to that later. I believe she noticed me come in with my pickup and some big equipment and came over to ask what kind of animals I had. She soon came to the point. She was looking for work. She had previous experience with cattle and was new to the region. It's unusual in our area to see single women looking for ranch hand employment, but she claimed she could prove herself, and if I wasn't impressed, I could drive her back to town and drop her off at the bus stop. I was seeking an extra hand for the next few months and had considered asking my neighbor's lads, but I decided to give her a chance. I'm pleased I did since she had a strong work ethic and was proactive about everything on the ranch. I let her remain in a guest room in the main home for the first week until she saved enough money for an apartment. Within 6 months she moved back in and we began dating. 8 months later, we married in a quiet ceremony attended by approximately 20 friends and family members. Her uncle was the only family member that turned up. Her uncle was a tank of a man, even in his old age, and he had a sheep farm in Northern California. During the ceremony, we talked a little about business, and he was pleased to give my wife away. I could tell how the father influenced her work ethic and livestock knowledge. However, there was one topic that my wife disliked discussing: her biological parents. At first, she only mentioned there was bad blood between them, which was great because we didn't know each other well yet. However, once we were engaged, I wanted to learn more about her family and what I was getting into. Her mother, the professor, worked at a college teaching a subject I would most likely never study. My wife portrayed her father, Phil, as a weak man who would do whatever the professor desired. Some of the details she told me about her mother's actions seemed ludicrous and borderline psychotic. For example, in middle school, the professor tried to obtain my wife a girlfriend by claiming she was a lesbian. Now, while my wife is a tomboy, she is not a lesbian. There was also a time when the professor desired to live a natural lifestyle, and begged Phil's brother to allow them to reside on his property. Within a week, the professor despised it and summoned them both back to the city. My wife, on the other hand, adored the farm and felt a connection to both it and her uncle. She left home at 16 and stayed with her uncle until she was 18. The professor repeatedly threatened to drag her back home, but never followed through. After turning 18, my wife went to school, received a 4-year degree, and tried an office job but found it unsatisfactory. She began traveling the bus to rural locations in search of suitable work, and this is how we met. Last year, around March, we began receiving mail addressed to the professor and Phil, including bills, bank statements, and the like. I thought this was unusual, but my wife wanted to throw it all away. I began labeling the letters "returned to sender" and "no such occupant," and returned them to the mailbox. This situation worsened in October. I was tidying up the yard when a brilliant white SUV arrived with a U-Haul trailer attached. My wife looked up and turned pale. "Oh God, it's them," she exclaimed. A plump woman and a slender man, who only distantly resembled her uncle, emerged. The professor instantly approached my wife. "Professor. Well, let me take a look at you. It has been years." The wife: "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Your instructor. The university is doing virtual classes, and with COVID, we figured we could self-isolate at our ranch." She placed an unusual emphasis on the word our. You. Excuse me, but this isn't your ranch. Professor. I'm confident we can resolve the ownership issue. Aren't you going to invite us in? Me? Ma'am, you might be my wife's mother, but you're a stranger to me. I would rather not. The professor turned to Phil. Professor. Make the call. Phil immediately called the cops and began constructing a story about us refusing to let them into the house that they co-owned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was insanely twisted. Fortunately, as I indicated earlier, it is a small town. The sheriff approached and it was someone I had known for most of my life. The sheriff exemplifies the ethos of a small town constable. He strives to be a peacemaker and peacekeeper first and foremost. He was also aware that the land had been in my family for 3 generations. Sheriff, please explain. What's this I hear about you selling half your ranch, Duke? Me? I did not. These are my wife's parents, and they believe they have a legal claim to my land. Professor. Not think? We have lived here since February. With tenant laws that means. Sheriff, you know. Funny, I don't remember you in town. That quieted the professor for a moment, but then she delved into her purse and drew out a stack of mail, mostly bills and bank statements with our ranch's address on them. Professor. Then how do you explain these? The sheriff took the letters and examined them. Sheriff, you're welcome. Ma'am, these are all marked return to sender. The professor became desperate. Professor. Please, I have not seen my daughter in years. I just want to make sure she is okay. Surely, you can see that he, she pointed at me, controls her every move. The sheriff rolled his eyes and approached to speak with my wife and me again. He enjoys resolving interpersonal conflicts, but he had never experienced such craziness. Sheriff, you might want to invite them in for coffee and chat for a few minutes. They're your parents. My spouse? If you leave them here, you'll just have to come back in 5 minutes to handle an assault. Sheriff. You can't mean that. They are your family. Look, I'm just heading up the road. Invite them in and talk to them. Wife's eyes flashed with rage. Your wife asked, does this mean you're going to invite your cousin Aaron to Thanksgiving? Aaron, the sheriff's cousin, was now serving an 8-year sentence for a variety of felonies. The sheriff's entire family regarded him a source of disgrace. The sheriff's expression changed after he made that statement. He gave my wife a look like, that bad, huh? And she simply nodded. The sheriff turned back to face the professor and Phil. Sheriff. Okay, they don't want you here. It's best if you don't come back. The two protested briefly before piling back into the SUV and driving away, with the sheriff following behind to verify they were completely off the property. This was my first meeting with the professor and Phil, and it left a lasting impression. Previously, I described how my wife's mother, the professor, made an unusual attempt to grab control of our property back in October. Things became crazier in December. Keep in mind that we reside in a little village approximately an hour from a major city, so we're not completely isolated. Our ranch is approximately 15 minutes from town via farm road. To give you the lay of the land, I stopped in town to grab some supplies, and by the time I finished packing up the truck, the professor tapped me on the shoulder. This time, she truly acted friendly. I decided to be curt. She literally begged me to listen to her for 5 minutes at the neighborhood cafe. I didn't want to set up a scene on Main Street, so I agreed. We sat down, and the lecturer began speaking. She claimed that my wife was always unsure of who she was, and that the professor and Phil only had her best interests in mind. I didn't want to rant or make charges. I was just waiting for the talk to end. Then she explained, your wife saw you coming and wedged herself into my life. I pushed back. I stated that I felt blessed to have her in my life. Professor. What do you mean blessed? Me. Pardon? Professor. You just said blessed. I put my head in my hands and wished it was over. Everyone in the cafe stared at the two of us. With her final sentence, the lecturer projected her voice. My response was, ma'am, if you're trying to win me over, I suggest you stop using vinegar. She huffed at the phrase but then became friendly again. She reached into her purse and took out a flash drive, laying it on the table between us. Professor. Okay, that's all the proof you need. Take a peek, and I guarantee you'll discover the truth. I was dying within, not just from shame, but also from the manner my mother-in-law behaved in front of individuals with whom I do business on a regular basis. They would certainly want to know what had transpired. Like I stated, it's a little town. I took the flash drive and fled. I returned to the property, where my wife was waiting. She could tell something had happened in town by the pissed-off expression on my face. I recounted what had happened while holding up the flash drive. My wife was baffled by it. I wasn't about to plug it into a computer we use on a regular basis, so I hunted through a closet for an old Dell laptop that hadn't been turned on in ages. We charged it, turned it on, and blocked the Wi-Fi, my wife's suggestion. We plugged the flash drive in and discovered heaps of PDFs. I'm still not sure how to convey what was within. It looked like a journal, a college article, or a thesis research, with my wife as the topic. I'm not sure what the aim was, or what the professor was testing on her own flesh and blood. It described her first experiences with toy dump trucks as a child, as well as dressed in overalls during their brief stay with her uncle, all of which were chilly, disconnected and, as my wife described it, clinical. My wife was referred to as the subject throughout. It was odd and I'm still unsure what the point was. My wife was outraged by the PDFs and urged us to burn the drive, which we did in the fire pit. That was the last time we heard from the professor, but my wife believes more will come. First and foremost, I want to mention that my wife is doing well. She's amused rather than terrified or furious, yet I can tell when she feels the need to be protected. We placed a new camera directed straight at the gate, which I'm keeping locked. I noted in the comments that we had a FaceTime contact with my wife's uncle last night to see if we could gain any additional information. Her uncle initially provided brief responses, such as, "Yeah, sounds like her," and "sounds about right." He is a don't speak ill of others type of chap. When I told him about the strange play for the ranch, he eventually revealed additional facts. Whoever predicted she'd do this before with his sheep farm gets a gold star. He stated that the professor was a major reason why he and Phil no longer speak. My wife's uncle's sheep farm was part of a much larger property owned by her grandfather. The grandfather had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter relocated to the East Coast and worked in a high-paying executive position. She is nearing retirement and was the oldest of the siblings. When the grandfather passed away, he divided his property into 3 portions. His daughter gave her half to the uncle for nearly nothing because she did not desire rural property and understood her uncle wanted to keep the farm running. The other son, Phil, retained ownership but granted uncle permission to use it. That was until Phil decided to attend an expensive university and sold his portion of the land to uncle for a good price. Uncle was able to maintain all of grandfather's land intact. Phil dated the professor during his undergraduate years and eventually married her. Uncle only heard bits and pieces because Phil only called around Thanksgiving and birthdays. That was it for many years. A few years later, the professor was in what Uncle described as a hipster phase when he learned about the farm. She didn't just show up, Phil asked first. Phil understood rural life, but the professor did not. Uncle portrayed the professor's ideal farm life as waking up to a kale smoothie, digging beets for lunch, and spending the rest of the day in the sun. If you live on a farm or ranch, you know there are plenty of everyday duties. Uncle's farm was largely a sheep farm, but they also had a vegetable garden and a small orchard, which provided enough of work. Uncle went easy on the professor, assigning her only a few tasks such as pruning dead vines in the garden and airing the compost. She took it as an agony. She nearly devastated Uncle's tomato crop that year, forcing him to redo the compost every evening. But the way she grumbled, you'd think she was looking after the entire orchard and all the sheep. She disliked manual labor but was strangely drawn to the concept of a farm. In my experience, joy cannot exist without pain. My wife, on the other hand, took to it right away. She enjoyed checking fences, maintaining the flock, distributing feed and working in the vegetable garden. Uncle mentioned that they had a local butcher who came by on occasion to take a couple lambs, depending on price and demand. The butcher paid the professor a visit once when he was on the farm. The butcher was a black man, which Uncle didn't bother or care about, but the professor made a big deal of welcoming him by shaking his hand and spoke in a sing-song, high-pitched tone. Uncle thought this was weird, so he mentioned it to us. The professor desired the farm but did not want to work it. She wanted to own it on paper and have Uncle and her husband manage it. She even persuaded her husband to fight the sale he had made with Uncle a few years before, in order to gain partial ownership. Of course, this went nowhere. Uncle had to pay a lawyer, but the case never reached court. After that, Uncle and the rest of the family refused to speak with Phil. I was curious, so I asked Uncle why the professor yelled at me when I stated I was blessed to have my wife. He chuckled and added, "Really kicked that hornet's nest, huh?" Then he mentioned that the first night the professor stayed with Uncle, he and his wife cooked dinner. When they sat at the table, Uncle was about to say grace. My wife flushed when he mentioned this. Apparently, this is a humiliating memory for her. The lecturer exclaimed, "This family doesn't say grace." Uncle shrugged. He wanted to be flexible and told her she didn't have to participate if she didn't want to. She tried to push things even farther, demanding that as long as she was in that house, no one would say grace. Uncle stated that this was the first time he had been disrespectful to the professor, and that no guest would tell him what he could and could not do in his own home. I'm not sure why the lecturer believed that individuals in rural areas did not attend church. After hearing about the sheep farm, I will contact a lawyer. We'll see how it goes. I believe I mentioned it in a previous piece, but we live in a tiny town, and my wacky mother-in-law, the professor, has already caused a stir in only 2 appearances, one at our house and another in town. What I appreciate about small communities is that everyone feels like family and looks out for one another. What I detest about small communities is how quickly gossip spread. The sheriff from my initial post is completely on our side. Dan has done his best to explain to everybody who asks that it is not their business. The difficulty is between my wife and me. We attempted to be social in town before COVID. We attended church regularly and took part in potlucks. I hired my neighbor's boys to help out on the ranch numerous times over the summer. We enjoy being social. When the professor created a disturbance at the cafe in December, I could feel the town's attention on me. Nobody knows what happened, but they want to. I can feel it. They are too polite to ask, yet not enough to avoid whispering. It's getting to us. The sheriff informed me that last week, the local pastor directly asked him what was going on with my wife and her mother. The sheriff stated that the pastor believed there should be an easy answer. Sheriff caught it in the bud. My wife's statements had a greater impact than we anticipated. The sheriff stated that unless we requested assistance, it was neither his nor the pastor's responsibility. He did remark to the pastor, and I recall how the sheriff put it to me, "They're part of your flock. She," referring to the professor, "is the wolf. Become an excellent shepherd." Despite this, I continue to receive strange looks whenever I am in town. Scenes like the one in December are unusual around here. Any advice? So it eventually occurred. The professor and Phil are in jail. The circumstances are also unusual, but we are relieved that a resolution has been reached. 2 nights ago, the sheriff called us in the middle of the day. My wife picked up, and after a few minutes of conversation, she began chuckling. She told me what the sheriff said. It appears the professor and Phil decided to try to sneak onto our property. Why? I can't predict this woman. The professor decided that instead of attempting to enter the ranch via the farm road, which we can see from our house, she and Phil would park a bit further away and enter our land via a neighbor's property. My neighbor to the east owns a small orchard and is a hobby beekeeper. He doesn't receive much honey each year, but what he does get he shares or sells at the farmer's market. The bees had just begun to pollinate the field chickweed here. The professor evidently stumbled upon his bee boxes, actually bumping into one. The bees start swarming her, and either she or Phil become enraged and kick one of the boxes over. My neighbor has a sensor perimeter around his bee boxes in case of bears, and it went off. He dashed to his bee boxes and saw 2 middle-aged people batting at bees and yelling. My neighbor phoned the authorities, and after about 20 minutes of attempting to burn and hose the bees down, he swiftly filed charges for the destruction of his bee box and trespassing. Apparently, there are additional charges for interrupting and ruining a farm's agricultural capabilities since his bees pollinate his orchard. They left. Both were apparently coated in stings and are currently in county jail. The sheriff stated that the professor is attempting to argue that the area where the bee boxes are located is a public easement and that she has legal access to it. For the time being, however, it is over. Everyone here breathes a great sigh of relief. Now to the next story. 7. Sil endured 2 assaults, leaving a letter that led my brother to disown his daughter. I raised her, but now he demands her house. To begin with, my sister-in-law Zara was a very kind and generous person. She always greeted me with love and made me feel like I was a sister from the first time I met her. We had grown really close over the years because we were both working women, and we would spend our weekends shopping or going to lunch together. Zara was always incredibly fit and took excellent care of her health. This is why the sad news of her breast cancer diagnosis shocked us all so deeply. We united behind her and supported her fight against cancer. I made it a point to visit her frequently during her chemotherapy rounds to spend time with her and watch over my infant niece whenever possible. During one of my visits to her home, while we sat together in her living room, she told me some news that broke my heart. Her voice trembled as she stated that her physicians had delivered a devastating diagnosis. Her cancer was severe and resistant to therapy. They'd given her a prognosis that left little room for optimism. The weight of her comments weighed heavily in the air, and I fought to find the perfect words to console her during that vulnerable moment. I asked her what I could do to make everything easy for her. Her eyes, which were typically filled with love and joy, suddenly showed a mixture of fear and resignation. She thanked me for everything I had done for her and expressed her desire not to burden me with a secret she had kept concealed from everyone. I strongly stated that she had nothing to apologize for and that I would do anything for her. No questions asked. She then entrusted me with a secret she had never told anyone, including her own parents. She told me that years ago, during her undergraduate days, she went through a horrible experience that has haunted her ever since. She was the victim of a sexual attack at a party, where she had been drinking too much. The attacker wore a mask, making it impossible for her to recognize him. The horror of that night left severe scars that she had been carrying silently for years. As she described the events of that fatal evening, I listened in terror. She was then in a relationship with my brother. Naturally, she looked to him for help and consolation, expecting that he would be the one person in the world who understood her. Instead of finding relief in his embrace, she was confronted with astonishment and accusations. My brother couldn't understand how another man could violate her in this way. In disbelief, he began to question her actions, indicating that perhaps her clothes or demeanor toward the guy at the party had prompted the assault. He refused to think that a man could accomplish such a thing unless the lady gave him a signal. Zara was heartbroken that he was questioning her in this manner. The weight of shame and guilt, wrongfully imposed on her by someone she loved, exacerbated her pain. Despite this, she summoned the bravery to denounce the assault to the police and even underwent a medical examination, which confirmed her claim about the assault. She wanted the culprit punished. Unfortunately for Zara, she lived in a college neighborhood where parties were prevalent and thousands of students congregated under the cover of night. Despite their best efforts, the authorities were unable to identify the masked assailant. It didn't help that none of the guests at the party came forward to testify for her. As a result, the inquiry stalled, and Zara never received justice. At the time, her parents were still living and the only ones who believed in her. This is how she overcame her great humiliation for what had occurred to her. According to Zara, after months of discussing the incident with my brother, he finally came around and apologized for his initial reaction. He realized that he should have known better and pledged to be more supportive of her going forward. Despite the strain on their relationship, Zara did not want to break it with him, so she chose to forgive him. Despite my brother's best efforts to be there for her in the years that followed, the tragedy never left her mind. I was saddened to hear this, especially since my brother had never mentioned any of it to me. Syl pointed out that my brother disliked discussing it and had even told her to keep the occurrence a secret, as if it were something disgusting for others to discover. I gently gripped Syl's hand and assured her that I didn't blame her for anything that had happened to her because it was never her fault. Syl smiled back bitterly and told me she had more to say. She talked slowly, as if each word was both a confession and a request for understanding. She then disclosed that she had been sexually attacked again after the initial event, this time by her former employer from her prior position. I remembered how, 2 or 3 years ago, she unexpectedly left her work, despite the fact that she had always enjoyed it. Syl had never told me why until now. Her hands trembled as she described how terrified and helpless she felt during the second assault. She informed me she was numb from shock during the event and could only move after the assault finished. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she departed the scene in a daze, her entire body trembling with the weight of what had just occurred. She recounted feeling detached from everything, as if she were witnessing the trauma from outside her own body. Later, as she sat in her car crying, her first thoughts drifted to my brother. She knew based on his earlier reaction that he would likely blame her again. She described how she felt the same shame when she realized she had been abused by another man without her consent. She felt unclean and repulsed by herself. This time, the trauma had a greater impact on her mental health since, unlike previously, she had no one to talk to. Her parents had died, and she was afraid to open out to my brother. As a result, she fell into melancholy and experienced a few panic attacks. Syl told me she debated whether to report the assault to the police and have her boss arrested, or to safeguard her marriage. Then, 3 weeks later, she learned she was pregnant. At that point, she was positive that the child was not my brother's. The weight of this realization devastated her even more, and she was unsure how to convey the news to my brother. She assumed he would ask for a divorce. As her mental health deteriorated, Syl decided to end her life. She told me how powerless she felt at the time, lacking the strength to end the pregnancy and not wanting others to know about the assaults. I listened to her story, holding back tears, unable to understand what she had been through silently, without any of us knowing. Syl went on to tell me how, the evening she decided to end her life with sleeping pills, everything changed. My brother unexpectedly discovered the positive pregnancy test in the restroom. Instead of waiting for an explanation, he began bouncing up and down, overjoyed that she was pregnant and that they could finally start a family together. Caught up in his joy and engulfed in his embrace, she found herself unable to bring him down with the truth. Later, she told me how humiliated she was for not having the strength to tell him the truth that day or over the course of the previous 2 years, that the child was not his. Sil informed me that every time she saw the delicate moments between her daughter and my brother, her heart broke again. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she apologized to me for lying to my brother and everyone else. She even referred to herself as a coward and a loser who did not deserve a family as great as ours. She believed that cancer was God's punishment for her falsehoods. She informed me she intended to disclose everything to my brother before she died. However, she asked me to make her a pledge. It turns out she wanted me to look after her daughter while she was gone. She pleaded with me with her hands since she had no family members left. Both her parents and grandparents had passed away. If my brother refused to accept the child after learning the truth, I was her only hope of caring for her daughter. I was quite shaken after hearing everything and needed some time to comprehend it all. As a woman myself, I felt profound sympathy for everything she had been through. I knew she was telling me the whole truth because she was dying and needed to get it off her chest. Of course, I realized that she had lied to my brother for so long about being the baby's father, but she was also visibly sorry. At this moment, all I could do was reassure her that if necessary, I would raise my niece on my own. She exhaled a sigh of relief as I fulfilled my promise to her. I continued to see Sil over the weeks as her illness advanced, holding out hope for her survival even as the reality of her condition became more apparent. She remained as courageous as possible throughout. Finally, she went away peacefully in her sleep. Her absence has created a void, yet her spirit continues to motivate me to live with compassion and gratitude. She showed me that even in the worst times, there can be grace and beauty if we have the strength to perceive it. She was more than just a sister-in-law to me. She was a friend and sincere confidant. After she died, my brother shared with me the contents of a letter written by my sister-in-law, which revealed the awful reality she had previously confided in me. He was heartbroken to realize that the child he had embraced with such delight was not biologically his. His anguish and rage were obvious as he dealt with this new reality, which was exacerbated by the recent death of his wife. In his grief, he couldn't bring himself to hold the infant anymore. Instead, he told our parents and me that he was going to give her up. I firmly told him that Sil had asked me to look after my niece, and that I wanted to take care of her even if he no longer wanted her. This is how I welcomed my niece into my home without hesitation. I was really heartbroken for her because she had just lost her mother, and with no other family left, her parents and grandparents had passed away. I knew she needed a stable and supportive atmosphere at the moment. Later, when we gathered for the reading of my sister-in-law's will, everyone was already emotional because they knew my niece did not belong to my brother. Many of my family members were divided over this news. However, Sil was no longer with us to face their fury. According to her will, she made specific and careful plans for her daughter's future, leaving every asset and resource she had amassed over the years for her daughter's benefit. Sil had a large fortune from both her parents and grandparents, so she had a lot of money to leave behind. To my brother's sorrow, nothing was allocated to him, exacerbating his pain and sense of betrayal. He yelled loudly that it was wrong of her not to leave anything in her will for him. Sil had specifically stated that she had committed the management of these monies to me provided I was willing to take on the responsibility of caring for her kid. This news surprised both me and everyone else present. I suppose this is why Sil wanted me to make that pledge to her weeks before she died, so she could update her will accordingly. She was correct to believe her intuition and not allow my brother access to her assets, since if that had been the case, he would never have let my niece have anything and would have abandoned her without money. My brother was unwilling to continue caring for the child, therefore I was eventually granted full custody of my niece. I've been able to care for her all these years because of the financial support I received. My brother attempted to battle me over the money Sil had left behind, believing he was entitled to at least half of it. However, the judge did not listen to him. In rage, my brother told me that he didn't want anything to do with Sil's daughter and that he never wanted to see my face again, saying that I had betrayed him by taking in the girl. I firmly told him that I was sorry for all of his sorrow, but I was not going to break my promise to Sil. My sister-in-law's decision to keep the facts from my brother was wrong, and I acknowledged that. However, now that she is no longer with us, I am convinced that the child is not to blame for her parents' conduct. This is why I've always focused only on establishing a caring and secure home for my niece, sheltering her from the intricacies of the past. Over the years, I've used the funds Sil left behind to ensure that my niece has everything she needs. I've also purchased a home for her, which my niece will entirely inherit once she reaches adulthood. I've made every effort to send her to great schools and care for her as if she were my own daughter. I am not married and have dedicated my entire life to raising my niece. Despite my best attempts, my niece, understandably, has concerns about her parents, especially her father. She misses my brother, but she understands that relationships cannot be forced in these circumstances. My decision to prioritize my niece's well-being has affected my ties with my other family members. They have all chosen to cut ties with me and no longer invite me to family gatherings, claiming that my actions are foolish and that I have prioritized my niece over my own. Even my parents believe I should have given up my niece and have often expressed their disappointment that I am raising someone else's child. As you might expect, the past several years have been a challenging journey in which I've had to negotiate the chasm between what I believe is right and the ramifications of those decisions on my family connections. This year, as my niece approaches her 18th birthday, I feel a sense of accomplishment as I prepare to transfer all of her assets, including the property I've acquired for her per Sill's desires. It's a significant achievement for which I've worked hard. I feel like I've done everything I could to protect her up until now, and she's ready to make her own decisions. My brother contacted me unexpectedly last week, saying he needed to discuss something very serious. My heart skipped a beat. I hoped he'd realized his mistake and wanted to reconnect with me and my niece after all these years. I agreed to meet with him, but I didn't want my niece to find out and get her hopes up until I knew why he was visiting. So I planned for us to meet when she was at school. When my brother came, there was a sense of expectation and warmth as we made small chat. He told me he has since remarried, and I was pleasantly surprised to learn that he now has 2 children of his own. He showed me images of them, and his boys looked exactly like him. I was disappointed that he hadn't invited me to his wedding, but I understood that he did what he had to do after Sill had deceived him. During our talk, I couldn't help but feel proud as I highlighted my niece's accomplishments and improvement over the years. I informed my brother that she occasionally inquired about him and was fairly mature for her age, thinking he would say he wanted to see her. Despite my excitement to communicate these wonderful tidings, he appeared indifferent to my niece. He interrupted me, his tone immediately changing to one of seriousness. He explained that he had come to meet me not to discuss my niece, but to request ownership of her house. I stared at him wide-eyed as he told how his family had suddenly lost their home and that our parents had already loaned him a large sum of money over the years, so he could no longer ask for assistance. Since he knew I had purchased the house with Sill's money, he believed it was only fair for me and my niece to let him keep the house to accommodate his large family while we relocated to a smaller space. I questioned him why he thought he could even pose such a question. My brother went on to defend it by claiming that he had previously done a lot for Sill, but she had turned out to be nothing more than a leech. I knew this wasn't true because Sill had always worked and paid her portion of the bills, including throughout her chemotherapy treatments. She covered her own medical expenses and had health insurance. I brought this out to my brother, telling him that it was ridiculous for him to expect a house when he hadn't even bothered raising my niece after Sill died. This simply made him angrier. He told me that, as his sister, I should stop holding a candle for a deceased woman and instead assist him and his family in securing the house before my niece turned 18. He persuaded me to view things his way, saying that the house was his legitimate possession. The weight of his words hung in the air as I considered his request. I couldn't help but consider the ramifications of such a decision. The property was more than simply a physical asset. It symbolized security and stability, which had been meticulously planned for my niece's future. To give it up, no matter how badly my brother needed it, would mean breaking commitments and risking the stability I had fought so hard to establish. My niece's well-being and future were paramount, and any decision involving her assets had to be made with her best interests in mind, no matter how difficult or emotional the situation. In that moment, I grasped the gravity of the situation and the need to stick to my beliefs. I informed him unequivocally that I could not support his request and that he should take responsibility for his own family rather than relying on his deceased wife's possessions. I continued to tell him how ashamed I was that he even considered this option, and how he had given up all rights when he handed over custody of his daughter to me following Sill's death. My brother's face flushed red with rage at my statement, but I continued before he could interject again. I voiced my disappointment that he had not been present for my niece during all of these years. I didn't hesitate to remind him that, while I realized Sill had betrayed him, he should also see that she had been the victim of countless traumas. It was unjust of him to put the blame onto her now, especially because he had not supported her after her first sexual assault. When I revealed the assault, his eyes widened in amazement, and he demanded to know how I knew about it. As no one else knew the truth. This is when I told him that Sill had confided in me and entrusted me with the task of caring for my niece before she died. When my brother heard this, he became accusatory, alleging I had surprised him and labeling me a liar, just like Sill. I shook my head, reminding him that Sill was terminally ill and had already endured enough. After all the years of him not taking responsibility for my niece while I had done everything I could to assist her, he had no right to bring up the past and complain now simply because he wanted Sill's money. I was weary of him constantly behaving like a victim. It was disheartening to see him shift blame and claim entitlement when he had not been financially supportive of my niece for years. His boldness in coming 16 years later and requesting ownership of her house felt like a slap in the face, ignoring all of my sacrifices and attempts to assure my niece's well-being and future security. My brother was unhappy because I refused to give in to his demands. Since our meeting, he and my parents have called me often, accusing me of being difficult for no reason and insisting that I have family devotion to them rather than my niece. It's demoralizing and terrifying to discover that when it comes to money, even your own blood relatives can devolve into something unknown. I continue to stand up for my niece and refuse to give in to my brother's unreasonable demands. Update 1. First and foremost, I am astounded by how kind everyone has been in my DMs and comments. Thank you for making me grin. Second, I can't tell you how many women have contacted me, giving their own stories and saying how closely they connect to what Sil went through. I wish I could give every one of you a great, tight embrace and relieve your anguish. Sexual assault is one of the most horrible things that can happen to a woman, and I wish someone could have helped Sil at the time. She wasn't a bad person, and she didn't deserve what she went through. It's unfortunate that I have to defend her, but just because you haven't suffered sexual assault doesn't imply others don't. Sil had demonstrated amazing courage following the first assault, but the second occurrence left her shaken, rightly so. She was immobilized in fear, as many sexual assault victims are. I wish she had felt comfortable enough to open up to me sooner, because I would have been there for her in every way. Knowing what she went through crushes my heart, and I wish I could have been there for her during those difficult days. To those who label Sil a cheater and question her narrative, I really pray you never go through such anguish only to have your truth challenged. If Sil had really had an affair, she may have instructed me to contact the man for custody after she died. Furthermore, if there had been an affair, the man would not have remained silent all these years. He would have most certainly come up, especially given how much money Sil left behind for her kid. If she had an affair, I'm sure she would have wanted her daughter to know her biological father. Sil did everything possible to safeguard her daughter. Update 2. I sat down with my niece and told her that my brother had lately been to speak with me, and his main goal was to gain control of the house. I advised her to be cautious if he ever approached her. As I talked, I could see the rage and pain in her eyes. She had hoped for years that her father would reach out to her because he actually cared. However, when she discovered that his contact was motivated by his own wants, she felt deceived. I can't believe him, she informed me, her voice shaking from emotion. After all this time, he only reached out when he needed something. She informed me that she did not want anything to do with him and expressed her gratitude that her mother had not left him anything. She then hugged me and expressed her gratitude for everything I'd done for her over the years. Her statements were simultaneously painful and empowering to hear. It brought tears to my eyes as I understood that despite the sorrow of her father's acts, she was strong and determined to carry on without him. Update 3. After speaking with my niece, I decided to send a lengthy email to my parents and brother to document everything and state my position clearly. In the email, I described our previous interactions and highlighted that they had no right to ask me to hand over my niece's home to my brother. I stressed that this request constituted financial fraud and stated unequivocally that I would take legal action if my brother attempted to see me or my niece again to request the house for his family. I informed my brother that by choosing not to care for his kid, he surrendered all rights. I also discussed the numerous difficulties and frustrations I had encountered while raising my niece on my own, with no prior experience. I highlighted the emotional, financial, and logistical hurdles I had faced in providing her with a secure and caring home. I also informed him that he had never paid child support or checked in on his daughter in all these years. I pointed out that he and my parents should feel nothing but guilt for attempting to take something that did not belong to them. I insisted that they had no right to suddenly intervene and make demands after all this time, especially because they had contributed nothing to her upbringing or well-being. The email was detailed and sincere, reflecting the sacrifices I had made for my niece. I reaffirmed my resolve to protect her and honor Sil's wishes no matter what. My message was clear and unequivocal. They had forfeited their right to be a part of her life due to their negligence and lack of support, and they had no place in her future. I never received a response after submitting the email. However, my brother and parents have not contacted me again, which is satisfactory for me. The silence speaks volumes, and I'm happy to have some peace knowing they won't meddle with my niece's life anymore. My niece is now preparing for her prom and impending birthday celebration. Watching her manage these thrilling occasions makes me very proud. I am so proud of the woman she has become, and I can't wait to support her at every big milestone in her future. It makes me emotional just thinking about how much she has grown and how much she resembles Sil, especially in her lips and brows. Every day I see Sil's strength and tenacity in my niece, and I only hope that she will be as strong as her mother, no matter what she does. Now to the next story 8. After my wife's betrayal with my business partner, I guard my daughter's future while they try to reinsert themselves in our lives. My ex-wife Kathy, 38, and I, 38, had been together for 19 years and married for 16. We also had a 14-year-old daughter together. However, she left approximately 6 months ago to be with my previous work partner. To be more specific, my ex-work partner, as he sold his shares and left the company once I uncovered the affair. Leon, the guy I used to run the firm with, was a co-worker and a close friend. We agreed to quit our jobs and form a company together. We'd been working together for 5 years, and he'd had an affair with my wife for 3 of them. I learned about it approximately 6 months ago when I discovered some text messages on my wife's phone. When I challenged her about it, she didn't even try to dispute it and instead accepted everything. She told me she was sick and tired of hiding things and simply wanted to leave. I was saddened since I had no notion she was unhappy in our marriage, and I was willing to do anything to change that. So on the day I confronted her, when she announced she was leaving, I assured her we could still make it work. That was very stupid of me, but I was desperate. She simply became irritated with me and stated that the only reason she married me in the first place was because she was pregnant and didn't want to be alone. She'd tried to love me for 16 years, but it hadn't worked. She was not going to let me stop her now that she had found someone she truly loved. She explained that now that I knew about the affair, her secret had been revealed, and I had to swallow it and move on. I was heartbroken, especially for the sake of our daughter, but she didn't even hesitate to leave. She filed for divorce, and the petition was quite simple. She simply wanted to leave and did not demand a settlement or alimony from me. The asset distribution was fairly balanced. We concluded the divorce after a few months. After a while, I knew that what had transpired would prevent me from making it work with her. After we filed for divorce, I faced Leon, who just apologized, claiming he had wanted to tell me about the affair for a long time but didn't know how. Within a few weeks, he quit and informed me that he and Kathy would be moving away to avoid causing further trouble for me. Kathy had been offered a fantastic job in Boston, and his cousin lived there, so he could work alongside him instead. He sent all of this in an email, and we never spoke again. The last time I saw Kathy was 2 months ago, on the day our divorce was finalized. Since then, I have not heard from one of them. My kid and I were going through a difficult time, but we were getting by. At least I still had my business to manage, which kept me busy since I wanted to provide my daughter the future she deserved. However, Kathy returned about a week ago and I'm still not sure if my daughter and I did the right thing. So around a week ago, at 11 p.m., someone began furiously ringing our doorbell and knocking. My daughter had already gone to bed and I was finishing up some work in my office when it happened. We hurried to the door to check and through the glass, we saw Kathy. My daughter urged me not to open the door because she was furious with her mother. Despite having partial custody, Kathy has made little effort to communicate with our daughter and the fact that she cheated does not sit well with her either. Their relationship is tight right now, but I knew if Kathy was at my house at such a late hour, it had to be urgent so I opened the door and allowed her in. Instead of coming in, she started ranting at me from the doorstep, threatening to sue me. She insisted on taking this to court so she could receive everything she was owed since she couldn't believe I had chosen to punish her so harshly. For the first few seconds, I had no understanding what she was saying, and I had to urge her to slow down and elucidate since I was so perplexed. She was still upset and said there was no need for me to pretend I didn't know because she was certain I had withheld Leon's true character from her to punish her for cheating. Then she pulled up her shirt sleeve and showed me a place on her arm covered in a band-aid. I concluded Leon must have done something, which surprised me because we had worked together for several years and he had never lost his cool in front of me. Kathy told me that they had been arguing for the past few weeks, ever since they moved to Boston. Nothing had remained the same since their move. She assumed it was because Leon was still adjusting to his new life, but after a month there, he was acting as if everything was Kathy's fault. He apparently kept accusing her of wrecking his life because he had to abandon the business he had fought so hard to build. Now he had to work with his cousin, who was always undermining him, and he blamed Kathy for everything. She was the one who told me about the affair before he was ready, and now he had to relocate to Boston for her work, so he couldn't compete for the business either. They'd been arguing every night, and the night before she arrived, he got incredibly angry and threw a vase at her. She attempted to dodge it, but it still struck her arm, causing a cut. Until that point, he had only verbally abused her, but this time it had gone too far, and she had left the house that night to take the next flight here to tell me about it. She told me that Leon had not even tried to contact her or apologize after she departed. She said I was to blame for this because she believed I was aware of his violent behavior and had concealed it from her in order to punish her. She thought it was unfair of me to do so, especially because she believed she had done me a favor by not fighting for anything during the divorce. I couldn't even get her back and secure her safety. It was all pretty foolish because, as I already stated, I had worked with Leon for a long time and knew him well, but just on a professional level. In the office, he was much different. I had never dated him and had only met the ladies he had previously dated, so there was no way I could have known about this side of him. Her charges that I had hidden everything on purpose made no sense to me, and I was furious that she was acting as if I owed her something. I attempted to explain to her that I had no idea about all of this and that I was deeply sorry that it was happening to her, but it was ultimately her fault. She could threaten me with litigation all she wanted, but she understood it wasn't my fault. She continued to argue, stating that I knew everything and that she would fight for everything she didn't get during our divorce. My daughter had been waiting at the door the entire time, and I had almost completely forgotten about her since I was so preoccupied with the fight. When we started talking in circles, she interrupted Kathy and told her to go. I was astonished since I didn't expect her to interrupt, and I believe Kathy was caught off guard. Kathy then advised my daughter to stop up and keep out of it because she was too little to understand what was happening. She told my daughter to go to bed, but she refused. She held firm and stated that Kathy had no right to speak to me in this manner, especially given what she had put me through. My daughter reminded Kathy that I had been sad for the past few months, ever since I discovered her infidelity. Kathy, the cruel and heartless monster that she was, simply carried on with her life. She then pointed out that Kathy had neglected to visit her own daughter or stay in touch since she was preoccupied with Leon and her new life. My daughter informed Kathy that she had failed to be a good wife and mother, thus she had no business acting like a victim in a scenario she had made for herself. My daughter is only 14, but seeing her express those things made me realize how much she had matured since the divorce. Kathy was completely speechless and unable to respond to our daughter's statements. Finally, my daughter informed Kathy that now that she had gone and was living with Leon, she would have to cope with whatever she was going through on her own because we were no longer her family. Kathy had dug her own grave, and now she had to lie in it. Which was exactly what she deserved for screwing people over. After saying this, my daughter slammed the door in Kathy's face and returned to her room. I could hear Kathy crying outside the door, but I didn't bother checking on her because I didn't think it was necessary given our recent chat. I too went back to bed, trying not to think about the issue for the following few days while keeping myself busy at work. I was quite proud of my daughter for standing up for me and not allowing me to appear weak in front of Kathy. Things were going well after that visit, but 3 days ago Kathy showed up again, this time with a lawyer, demanding complete custody of our kid. Fortunately, our daughter was out with a couple of friends when she came over in the evening, so I haven't told her anything about it yet. I was furious when Kathy informed me that after our daughter spoke with her the last time we met, she decided she would no longer allow our daughter to live with me. She informed me that the actual reason she hadn't tried to contact our daughter after I found out about the affair was that she didn't want to become involved in a lengthy custody battle that would disturb my life much more than she already had. This, she claimed, was why she wanted to depart discreetly and hadn't attempted to contact our daughter. She thought it would have made matters worse because I was furious about the situation. So she was basically trying to tell me that she did all of this for my sake, not just to get out of having any responsibilities. I was clearly not buying it, and I informed her that the only reason she didn't fight for anything during the divorce, let alone custody of our kid, was that she wanted to leave swiftly and start a new life with Leon. This had nothing to do with me, as she tried to make it seem, therefore I didn't need to feel sorry for her. However, she stated that she no longer cared about that since she now desired full custody of our daughter and was determined to ensure that she received it. She insisted that she would not let me ruin my daughter's opinion of her by telling her ridiculous stories and training her to disrespect her mother. Kathy said that during our last meeting, our daughter was extremely disrespectful to her, and that I encouraged this conduct. She now knew what to do and had returned to inform me that she was taking this to court. I told her to be my guest and closed the door because I didn't want to waste any more time talking to her. However, I began to question whether she had a point. I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't sure, to be honest, so I felt bad about not reprimanding my daughter when she was rude to her mother. Update 1, I've determined that I have nothing to be sorry for. My daughter did the correct thing in sticking up for me, and the comments made me understand how silly I was. She cheated on me, so I don't think I should feel sorrow or regret for what happened to her. Many people in the comments urged me to speak with my daughter first since it would be unfair for her to be caught off guard if Kathy applies for full custody after our last meeting. So I told my kid about it yesterday. I didn't want to withhold anything from her. She has already demonstrated to me that she is grown enough to handle these situations, and I feel horrible that she had to mature overnight. At least now, I can help her prepare for the future. So yet, We haven't heard from Kathy, but we expect to shortly. Our daughter is 14, which means she can be considered in court if the situation escalates. If we can reach an agreement during mediation, that would be ideal, but just in case, I have confirmed that she actually wants to stay with me. She has made it clearly plain that she doesn't want anything to do with Kathy, not just now anyhow. She told me that in the future, she would contemplate reuniting with Kathy and restoring their connection, but for the time being, everything is too fresh. She clearly blames her mother for splitting up the family, and I can't say anything because it's technically correct. I don't want to be the type of father who turns his child against his ex-partner for petty reasons, but in this case, I don't think there is much I can do. Kathy has done a fantastic job alienating our daughter, who now prefers to keep her distance from her own mother. They were fairly close before the affair came to light, so this is a significant departure from what they were both used to. Kathy is clearly irritated that my daughter is on my side, as she has always attempted to be closer to her. Speaking of which, several of you wanted to know who informed our daughter about the affair. It was Kathy, not me. She confessed in an email to our daughter a few days after she moved out, without first asking if I wanted to be involved. My kid was really unhappy when she found out, but she still wanted to speak with her mother just once. However, Kathy refused. When I tried to contact Kathy to let her know our daughter wanted to talk, she refused because she was too preoccupied with the divorce process. She also didn't think it was proper to discuss it, so she expressed what she wanted to say in that email and had nothing else to add. I attempted to persuade her to speak with our daughter only once because she appeared to have a lot of questions. However, Kathy remained adamant about her decision. After that, she stopped speaking to us entirely, and my daughter's perception of her mother shifted dramatically. Kathy holding me responsible for that does not seem fair to me. Anyway, I've spoken with my lawyer and we're going to deal with this. Update 2. Kathy ultimately served me with the notice for full custody a few days ago, and my lawyer and I responded by fighting it right away. We are scheduled to meet with the court-appointed mediator tomorrow, but Leon called me today. I was shocked to see his name on my phone because we didn't have much to chat about, but I answered the call. As soon as I did, he asked me to return Kathy to him. He claimed he'd been trying to reach her for a few days and knew she'd been with me or spoken to me, so he wanted me to tell her where she was. I told him I had no idea where she was residing, but I had spoken with her in the last several days and she was here to battle for custody of our kid. To be clear, I did not do this to help Leon, but I hoped that if Leon stopped by and chatted with Kathy, he might alter her mind and convince her to return. If I was lucky, he might even get her to sign over her rights to our daughter. With that in mind, I told him everything and added that she was upset since he had not contacted her after she left that night. I urged that if he wanted her back, he should act immediately. The poor guy had no suspicions and had no idea he was being exploited, which worked out perfectly for me. I just hope Kathy still wants to make it work with him. When he comes back, she might accompany him. I also discussed this idea with my lawyer, who confirmed that what I did was correct. Even though the odds are already in our favor, it doesn't hurt to save time and energy by resolving this before going to court. Update 3. Kathy and I met for our first mediation session 2 days ago and it obviously did not go well. She disagreed with all of our views and said it was all a waste of time before ending the session after half an hour. After she left, I returned home after picking up my kid from school. When we returned, Leon was waiting for us at our door. The poor guy appeared to be in a dreadful state, and I can only imagine how he must be feeling after spending a few months with Kathy. I told him he needed to leave because my daughter and I had just returned home and wanted to rest. We didn't have time to cope with his turmoil, and I had already helped him in whatever way I could. I couldn't go out of my way to aid the man who had been having an affair with my wife, but he actually broke down, claiming that after their last battle, she hadn't even responded to any of his texts, and he had no idea where to seek for her. I informed him, as I had before, that I still didn't know where she lived and that I couldn't help him. He just slumped down on the front steps, crying and holding his head in his hands. At that moment I began to become upset since this guy and Kathy had literally ruined my life and now he felt comfortable enough to seek my assistance in finding her so they could settle things. I ordered my daughter to go inside so I could deal with this, and after she was inside, I told Leon he needed to leave because I was done with both of them for good. For good measure, I gave him Kathy's parents' contact information and told him to call them if he couldn't reach her. But he had to leave us alone immediately. I told him that he had damaged both mine and Kathy's lives. He tried to apologize, saying he didn't mean to harm me, but he'd fallen in love with her and couldn't stop himself. I didn't want to hear it, so I said nothing, and he departed. I'm constantly exhausted and bewildered, and I have no idea what I'm doing with my life right now. I sincerely hope and pray that Leon and Kathy can make things right for my sake, If not theirs. Because if they do, they will most likely leave me and my kid alone, and I will finally be able to move on with my life. At this point, I'm not sure what's going on or how I should feel about anything. I'm numb for the most part and can't wait for this to be over. Update 4. Kathy stopped our mediation sessions a few days ago, saying she wanted to take our case to court. That would not end well for her, as we all knew, but it appears she was no longer in denial. Anyway, she came to see me a few hours ago with Leon. I suppose they were able to patch things up. I didn't invite them in since my daughter was home and unwell, and I didn't want to make things worse for her. I ordered them to wait for me at a nearby cafe, called my mother to take care of my daughter, and then went to the cafe to hash things out. When I arrived, Kathy and Leon apologized for everything they had put me through. Again, I had to inform them that this no longer mattered to me. I really wanted them to move on and explain why they had called me there. I didn't want to waste my time with insincere apologies, so they stopped skirting the issue and informed me that they recognized they had made a mistake by screwing me over and that they were really unhappy in Boston. Kathy missed our daughter, while Leon missed being his own boss. Kathy now wanted me to agree to send our daughter to see her every weekend, or every other weekend, because she didn't want to give up her current life. Leon's demands were even more outrageous. He wanted to return as a partner in the company and open a branch in Boston. The finest part of all was that they expected me to make a decision within a few days. Kathy's bosses had advised her that if she wanted to keep her job, she needed to return because she could no longer work from home. Even if I wanted to tell them I would think about it, I didn't have the option. That's why I ended up telling them I couldn't agree to any of it. Leon had already quit and sold his shares, which I had on paper, so I was not going to hire him again because I didn't trust him at all. Kathy's proposal was unreasonable because our daughter did not deserve to go back and forth every other weekend simply to see her mother. She should have considered these things before moving to Boston. This is absolutely not my fault. They began to dispute with me, saying they were willing to compromise since they did not want to fight this in court. I told them that the thought of fighting for what they wanted in court and actually winning was ridiculous. They only wanted to bargain with me in person because they believed they could manipulate me. Unfortunately, I was not weak or stupid enough to believe any of this. The only reason I'd come to meet them was to put an end to this. That actually silenced them, since they realized they'd never win if this went to court. I told them that the most I could do for them, or Kathy in particular, was to talk to our daughter and get her to meet Kathy whenever she came to visit. Aside from that, I wasn't doing anything, so they could take or leave it. I wasn't going to waste any more of my time arguing with them. Kathy seemed desperate, so she consented quickly, and I left. I will talk to my daughter when she feels better, but I will not compel her to do anything she does not want to do. If she decides she doesn't want to see her mother again, that is her choice. I am not going to convince her. Update 5. Hello, a few months have gone by. In my last update, I stated that I would not push my daughter to meet her mother if she did not wish to. I next spoke with my daughter, telling her what I had said to Kathy. She stated that she wanted some time to consider things over, so I expressed this to Kathy a few months back. Since then, we have not communicated. I'm not sure if she and Leon have settled their differences. I don't care. According to what I know, they are still together and living in Boston. Good for them, I suppose. At least they've left me alone, so I can now start to move on. That's exactly what I'm doing. The best revenge is to live well, therefore I'm focusing on working and growing my kid to be a wonderful human being, unlike her mother. Basically, I hope I am successful in doing so. Now to the next story 8. After refusing to babysit my stepsister's kids, my dad threatened to cut me off, leading to uncovered family secrets and strained ties. I'm Sophia, 28F, and I've been dealing with some family trouble recently. My parents split when I was 10, and it was not a good experience. My mother moved out, and I lived with my father for several years. It was only the two of us. We were close, and I assumed we told each other everything, but as I got older, I realized there were many things my father withheld from me. When I was 16, my father introduced me to Linda, 50F. They had been dating for a time without informing me. I was hurt that he kept this a secret, but I attempted to be supportive. A few months later, they married, and Linda moved in with her daughter, Emma, 25F. The transition was difficult. I went from being an only kid to suddenly having a stepsister. Emma and I never really clicked. She was lively and outgoing, whereas I was more reserved. We were courteous to one another, but we never became close friends or anything like that. At 18, I moved out for college, relieved to get some space from my new family. I focused on my academics and met new people. After graduating, I found a job in the same city and decided to stay. I'd go to see my father and Linda on holidays, but that was about it. Emma and I scarcely communicated, just exchanging birthday texts and attending family dinners when I was in town. Fast forward to today. Emma recently came to my city with her 27-year-old husband Jake, and their 2 children, Liam, 4M, and Ava, 2F. Jake accepted a new position at a technology startup, so they relocated here. Emma does not work. She is a stay-at-home mom. When they first moved, my father called and requested me to assist them settle in. I was not delighted about it, but I agreed. I took them around the city, helped them select a suitable neighborhood, and even helped with part of the relocation. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. Emma began visiting my flat every evening with her children about a week after they relocated. She would ask me to look after them for an hour or 2 while she went errands. I initially accepted because I wanted to be nice, but it soon became a daily occurrence. I worked from home as a graphic designer, and while I was finished with work by the time she took the kids off, I value my alone time in the evening. I utilize that time to relax, work on personal projects, or socialize with friends. The kids are okay, but I'm not really a kid person. I don't know how to keep children entertained, and being around them always makes me nervous. I reminded Emma several times that she needed to hire a babysitter, but she always had an excuse. "It's just for today," she'd remark. "I'm still getting used to the city." I started to suspect she was taking advantage of me. Last Friday, I had planned to go out with my pals. We were celebrating my best friend's promotion, which I'd been looking forward to all week. I told Emma in the morning that I would be unable to watch the kids that evening. She said okay, and I assumed that was all. But at 6 p.m., just as I was about to leave, Emma arrived at my door with Liam and Ava. Before I could say anything, she handed me the kids and drove away. I tried calling her, but she did not answer. I even called Jake, but he did not respond. I had to postpone my plans and stay at home with the kids. I was infuriated. Emma had ruined my plans before, but this was the first time she fully ignored my refusal to babysit. I was trapped with the kids until 9 p.m., when Emma arrived to pick them up. When she arrived, I challenged her regarding her behavior. She pretended it was no big deal and claimed she had an emergency. When I pressed her for information, she was unclear and evasive. I warned her that this could not happen again and that she needed to get a proper babysitter. Emma became enraged and stated I was being selfish, and that families should assist one another out. That is when I lost my temper. I told her that we were not truly relatives. I explained that just because our parents married doesn't mean we had to be close. I informed her that we had scarcely spoken in years before she moved here, and now she was acting as if we were best friends. I told her I was done babysitting and that she shouldn't bring the kids over until invited. Emma left in tears. I felt awful, but also happy that I had finally established a clear boundary. I believed that was the end of it, but I was mistaken. The next day, my father called me. He was upset with me. He stated Emma had contacted him crying, accusing him of being nasty to her and the children. My father told me that I should apologize and continue to babysit Emma. He said that this is what families do for one another. I attempted to convey my side of the situation. I informed him about Emma taking advantage of me, repeatedly ruining my plans and never respecting my time or boundaries. But my father was not listening. He continued emphasizing that I should be more understanding and helpful. Then my father said something that deeply saddened me. He called me selfish and expressed disappointment in the person I had become. He told me that Linda and Emma were now my family, and I needed to accept it. He even mentioned how distant I had been since he married Linda, hinting that I still harbored a grudge. I was shocked. I told him they were his family, not mine, and that I was an adult capable of making my own decisions. I told him that I had my own life and obligations and I couldn't just drop everything to be Emma's on-call babysitter. This resulted in a major debate. My dad threatened to cut me off if I didn't apologize to Emma and resume babysitting. I felt hurt and enraged. I informed him I was self-sufficient and didn't need his money. I also suggested that if he wanted to cut me off over this, perhaps we weren't as close as I believed. My father ended the call by hanging up on me. Linda and other family members have since messaged me, accusing me of being unfair. They suggest that I be more empathetic of Emma's circumstances as a young mother in a new city. Some of my aunts have even called to say I'm pulling the family apart. Emma hasn't contacted me directly, but she has been writing on social media about how families should always be there for one another. She has been tweeting quotes about the value of sisters and how blood does not determine family. It appears like she is attempting to publicly guilt-trip me. I feel like I'm going mad. Am I truly in the wrong here? I don't think it's fair for Emma to expect me to be a free babysitter anytime she wants, and I don't think my father should threaten me about it. But I'm beginning to wonder whether I went too far in claiming Emma and Linda aren't my real family. Part of me feels guilty. Perhaps I could have been more patient with Emma. Perhaps I should have tried more to connect with her when we were younger. But another part of me is angry and resentful. I feel that my thoughts and boundaries are not being respected. I have always treasured my freedom. After my parents divorced, I learned to rely on myself. I worked hard in school, received a college scholarship, and have established a successful profession. I'm not used to having people rely on me in this way, and I'm not sure I want the responsibility. At the same time, I can't stop thinking about Liam and Ava. They're innocent in all of this, and I genuinely care about them. I don't want kids to feel rejected or undesired, but I also don't think it's good for them to have an aunt who dislikes babysitting them. I tried discussing this with some of my friends, but they seem divided. Some believe I'm being overly harsh and should try to work things out with Emma. Others believe that I'm correct in setting boundaries and Emma is entitled. I do not know what to do. Should I apologize? Should I stand my ground? I feel like this thing has spiraled out of control, and I'm not sure how to fix it. I don't want to lose my relationship with my father. But neither do I want to be taken advantage of. This scenario has caused me to question a lot about my family and myself. Am I really as selfish as my father claims? Have I been harboring bitterness for his remarriage without realizing it? Should I have worked more to develop a relationship with Emma over the years? I keep thinking about how things may have turned out differently if my mother was still present. She relocated across the nation after the divorce, and we don't communicate much. I wonder what she would say about all of this. I am at a loss. I believe that no matter what I do, someone will be upset with me. I want to do the right thing, but I don't know what that is anymore. Update 1. It's been almost 2 weeks since my last post, and things have only become more complicated. I'd like to thank everyone who responded and offered suggestions. It let me see things more clearly. After reading the comments, I decided to stand my ground. I did not apologize to Emma or begin babysitting again. This created some strained family relations. My father stopped communicating to me completely, and Emma continued to post passive-aggressive messages on social media about false family members and the value of being present for your nieces and nephews. The quiet from my father was especially difficult. We used to communicate at least once a week, but now there is nothing. I tried to convince myself that it was for the best and that I was creating good limits, but it still hurt. My stepmother, Linda, attempted to mediate the conflict. She contacted me several times, attempting to get me to reconcile with Emma and my father. She said she understood where I was coming from, but that family valued compromise. I appreciated her efforts, but I still felt as if everyone was rejecting my emotions. I immersed myself into my profession, taking on extra freelance projects to take my mind off the family problems. I also began going to the gym more frequently and took up a new hobby, painting. It was soothing to produce something lovely in the midst of my life's craziness. However, something unexpected occurred last week, which changed everything. I was in a neighborhood coffee shop working on a project when I overheard a familiar voice. It was Jake, Emma's husband. He was seated at a table with a woman I did not recognize. At first, I assumed it was a work colleague, but then I noticed Jake reach across the table and take the woman's hand. They spoke in quiet tones and looked at each other in a way that indicated this wasn't a nice meeting. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. Jake was supposed to be at work, not having what appeared to be a love encounter with another woman. I sat there frozen, unsure what to do. Shall I confront him? Should I snap a photo as proof? In the end, I did not do either. I silently gathered my belongings and exited the coffee shop. I went home, my thoughts racing from what I'd just watched. I did not confront Jake. I wasn't sure whether I should tell Emma. Will she believe me? Our relationship was already fragile, and accusing her husband of adultery might only make matters worse. I chose to sit with the information for a day and consider what to do. The next evening, Emma called me. I almost didn't respond, assuming it was another attempt to guilt me into babysitting. But something prompted me to pick up. Emma was in tears and asked if she could come over. I consented, believing she might have learned about Jake. When she came, she was a complete wreck. Her eyes were red and puffy and she appeared to have not slept for days. But it was not about Jake at all. Emma admitted she had lied about running errands when she left the kids with me. She acknowledged seeing a therapist for postpartum depression and anxiety. Emma broke down while telling me her experience. She has struggled since Ava's birth, feeling overwhelmed and inadequate as a mother. She hadn't told anyone in the family because she felt humiliated and terrified of being judged. She left the kids with me during her therapy appointments. I was stunned. I felt a range of emotions: pity for Emma's situation, rage that she had deceived and taken advantage of me, and regret for how harshly I had judged her. I told Emma that, while I realized she was going through a difficult period, it was unacceptable for her to lie and dump her children on me without notice. We spoke for hours. Emma apologized for her conduct and for not being open about her issues. She promised to hire a proper babysitter for her sessions. I informed her that, while I couldn't be a regular babysitter, I would be happy to assist out on occasion if she gave me advance notice. As we spoke, I began to view Emma in a new light. I learned that despite her seemingly wonderful life, she struggled just like everyone else. It made me reflect on how little I understood about her life and how quickly I had judged her. Emma also discussed her emotions of loneliness after moving to the city. She stated she was thrilled to be closer to me, believing we could finally have the sisterly bond we had never had. She said she had pushed too hard and too quickly, and she apologized for not respecting my boundaries. I also conveyed my own feelings. I told her how I felt left out after Dad remarried and how I battled to fit into our new family dynamic. We chatted about our childhood, sharing recollections and opinions that we had never discussed before. Just as we were beginning to restore our relationship, I was faced with the decision of whether to inform Emma about what I observed with Jake. I debated the option, but in the end I chose to be honest with her. I gently informed her what I had seen in the coffee shop. Emma's reply was not what I expected. She didn't appear astonished or outraged. Instead, she became extremely silent before saying, "I know about Jake's meetings. It turns out that the woman Jake was meeting is his half-sister. Jake was adopted as a baby and had lately discovered his biological family. He had been meeting with his half-sister in secret since he was not ready to inform Emma or the rest of the family. He was concerned about how it may affect their family relationships, particularly with his adoptive parents. I was happy Jake was not cheating, but I was also frustrated by our family's concealment. I told Emma that all of this, her treatment, Jake's meetings, could have been avoided if everyone had simply been honest from the start. Emma agreed and said she'd speak with Jake about being more open with the family. She also pledged to be more open with me in the future. We concluded the evening on a brighter note than we had in weeks. The next day, I called my father. I informed him about Emma's troubles and how we had worked things out. I also told him that, while I was willing to have a relationship with Emma and occasionally help out with the kids, my limits needed to be respected. To my amazement, my father was understanding. He apologized for his reaction and acknowledged that he had put too much pressure on me. We promised to improve our communication and respect each other's boundaries more. We also talked about the past, including how his remarriage affected me and how we had grown apart over time. It was a challenging conversation, but it seemed like we were finally confronting topics we had been ignoring for too long. Things have calmed down, but I still feel like I'm walking on eggshells. There are numerous secrets and unsaid concerns in our family. I'm glad Emma and I were able to sort things out, but I have a feeling there will be more trouble. I'm trying to stay positive, but I'm also bracing myself for what might happen next. This entire experience has made me realize how little I knew about my family members. It's made me ponder what additional mysteries lie beneath the surface. For the time being, I'm working on gradually restoring my connections with Emma and my father. It's not easy, and there are still periods of tension, but it appears like we're headed in the right path. I'm discovering that family connections are complicated, and communication and honesty are essential. I'm also trying to strike a balance between being present for my family and preserving my own boundaries. It's a work in progress, but I'm hopeful that we can be family without compromising our distinct wants and identities. Update 2. It has been approximately a month since my last report and I wish I could say that things have improved, but they have not. In reality, things have gotten a lot worse. Remember how I started to feel like more drama was about to unfold? Well, I was correct, but I could not have foreseen what happened next. Emma called me last week, frantic. She was in tears and hardly intelligible. When I calmed her down, she informed me that she had received some horrible news. Jake hasn't simply met his half-sister. He's had an affair with her. Emma grew suspicious of Jake's numerous meetings and decided to follow him. One day, she noticed him meeting the woman at a hotel rather than the customary coffee shop. She approached him, and he confessed to the affair. He attempted to excuse it by claiming that he felt a connection with his half-sister that he had never had before, but Emma was understandably appalled and devastated. I was shocked. I felt bad for not pressing harder when I initially saw Jake with the woman. I attempted to console Emma as best I could over the phone, but she was distraught. She explained that she was leaving Jake and asked if she and the kids could stay with me for a bit. Despite our previous disagreements, I couldn't send her away in her time of need. I agreed to let them stay. Emma and the kids moved in with me the next day. It's been a tough transition. My flat isn't really designed for 2 young children, and Emma is still really emotional. She alternates between tears and aggressive outbursts. I'm trying to be supportive, but it's taking its toll on me. To make matters worse, Jake has been bugging Emma with continuous phone calls and messages. He's even popped up at my flat several times, causing havoc in the corridor. I had to threaten to contact the police to get him to go. It has been distressing for everyone, especially the children, who do not understand what is going on. Another explosive went off in the midst of the mayhem. My father contacted me, seeming anxious. He said he needed to tell me something important and asked if he could come over. When he arrived, he dropped a bombshell that shocked me to the core. It turns out Jake's half-sister is also my half-sister. My father admitted to having a brief romance with Jake's biological mother years ago, before meeting my stepmother. This woman gave birth to a daughter, who Jake has been having an affair with. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I heard. My father had held this secret for nearly 30 years. He stated he only found out recently when Jake's half-sister took a DNA test and it matched some of our family members. My father got in touch with her and learned the truth. I felt as if my entire universe was crumbling. Everything I believed I knew about my family was a lie. I was angry with my father for keeping this a secret, at Jake for betraying me, and at myself for failing to anticipate any of this. I haven't told Emma about the recent revelation yet. She's already coping with so much, and I'm worried this may push her over the brink. But I know I'm going to have to tell her someday. The previous several days have been a haze. I've been trying to keep things regular for the kids while simultaneously supporting Emma and dealing with my own thoughts about this new sister. I've taken some time off work to deal with everything, but I'm not sure how long I can do it. I'm at a loss on what to do next. My flat has become a refuge for my sister and her children, a safe haven from her cheating husband, and it now feels like the hub of a decades-long family scandal. I'm trying to keep everything together, but I feel like I'm drowning in secrets and lies. I'm not sure how our family will ever heal from this. The trust has been damaged, and I'm not sure it can be repaired. I'm thinking about going to therapy to deal with all of this, but for the time being, I'm just taking it day by day. I've tried to contact some friends for help, but it's difficult to explain the scenario without seeming like I'm making it up. How would you inform someone that your brother-in-law is having an affair with your hidden half-sister? It sounds like something from a horrible soap drama. I am also concerned about the long-term ramifications of all of this. What will happen to Emma and the children? Will Jake seek custody? And what about my half-sister? Should I try to reach her? Do I really want to know her? Given the circumstances, it's also worth considering how this may influence my relationship with my father. I'm upset that he kept this a secret for so long, but I understand that he was probably terrified and ashamed. Even so, knowing what he did makes it difficult to look at him in the same way. For the time being, my primary emphasis is on Emma and the children. Despite the volatility, I'm attempting to provide a stable atmosphere for them. It's not simple, but it seems like the proper thing to do. I'm also attempting to care for myself. I've started journaling to help me process my emotions, and I'm making an effort to do something I enjoy every day. Even if it's as simple as reading a book or going for a walk. I know I'll have to make some important decisions shortly about Emma's predicament, my connection with my father, and whether or not to contact my half-sister. But for now, I'm just trying to get through each day. If anyone has been through something similar and has any suggestions, I'd be grateful. This entire scenario is daunting, and I could use all of the help I can get. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and much has changed. After the shock of the discoveries subsided, we had to cope with the aftermath. I eventually told Emma that Jake's affair partner is our half-sister. She was devastated all over again, but it also provided her with the necessary closure. She sought for divorce and received a restraining order against Jake. The legal procedure has been messy, but Emma is sticking firm. Emma and her children remained with me for approximately a month before she found a tiny apartment of her own. She began working part-time at a local bookstore and is gradually reconstructing her life. This experience has actually brought us closer together. I occasionally help her with the kids, but only on my terms, and she respects my boundaries. We haven't contacted our recently discovered half-sister. We aren't ready for it yet, and I'm not sure we ever will be. The circumstances of her existence, as well as her acts with Jake, make it difficult to consider having a relationship with her. My relationship with my father has been strained. I was upset with him for hiding such a significant secret for so long. We've had several lengthy, painful discussions on trust, honesty, and the consequences of his decisions. He has been visiting a therapist to deal with his shame and learn how to regain trust with his family. It is a slow process, but we are making progress. I've started visiting a therapist to deal with all of my inner problems. It's helped me go through my feelings and set reasonable boundaries. I am learning that it is acceptable to prioritize my own mental health and well-being, even when family members are in crisis. One unanticipated result of all this is that I've reconnected with my mother. After everything came out, I contacted her because I needed someone to talk to who wasn't personally engaged in the situation. We've had some wonderful discussions and she's been a source of comfort throughout this. We're striving to restore our relationship and it's been great to have her back in my life. I've also made significant changes in my life. I decided to take a sabbatical and travel. I needed to go away from the family drama and rediscover myself. I'm writing this post from a modest cafe in Europe, where I've spent the last month. This distance has helped me gain perspective. I've come to learn that, while family is important, it is not everything. People who genuinely care about you will respect your boundaries and will not pressure you to sacrifice your ideals or well-being. I don't know what the future holds for my family. The lost trust will take a long time to recover, if at all. But right now, I'm focusing on myself, healing and growing. I'm learning to define family on my own terms and surround myself with people who bring happiness into my life. Emma and I communicate regularly. She's doing better now, focused on her children and her new career. The divorce proceedings are ongoing, but she's managing them with strength I didn't know she possessed. We are arranging a trip with the kids next summer, something to look forward to. Jake, as far as I know, has left the city. His affair with our half-sister ended horribly, and he's been attempting to reconcile with his adoptive family. I don't know all the specifics, and honestly, I don't want to. My father and I are progressively restoring our relationship. We talk once a week, and while things haven't returned to normal, they're improving. He's trying to be more open and honest, not just with me, but with everyone in the family. This entire event has taught me a great deal about resilience, forgiveness, and the value of honesty. It has also taught me that it is never too late to establish boundaries and prioritize your own well-being. Thank you to everyone who has followed my tale and offered advice along the way. Your support has meant more than you realize. If there's one thing I've taken away from this, it's that life may take you by surprise in unexpected ways. All we can do is strive to approach each day with honesty, courage, and self-respect. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.